turning up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
A really important thing about GB News, and it's brought something completely different to the landscape.
The mainstream is all about keeping the status quo as it is, ticking along quite nicely. They don't want to ask difficult questions.
GB News exists because there is a desperate need for fearless journalism that puts the people first.
GB News came on the scene as a disruptor, and it has always been a disruptor ever since.
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, the reality is that most British journalists are afraid.
That's not GB News.
Journalism is journalism at the end of the day, and we're not here to serve any masters. Our masters are our audience.
We're here to talk about things in a way that have never been broadcast on British airways before.
Do not miss a moment on GB News.
The #1 news channel in the country.
Live from London, this is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Now, in just 1 hour, the Artemis 2 crew will end their record-setting moon flyby mission as they brace for a heart-stopping fireball splashdown in the Pacific Ocean.
In the home stretch of what ultimately will be a 694,481-mile journey from launch to splashdown.
I'm Tom Harwood, and this is a special out-of-this-world edition of The Late Show Live.
GLS is go for 4 stages.
Max Earth altitude. This view coming from inside the Orion spacecraft.
You really get a sense that we're flying over something just so visually captivating.
Welcome to this historic and special edition of The Late Show Live. Well, joining me this evening in London is my panel of space expert Andy Lound, astrophysicist researcher Maggie Liu, journalist and broadcaster Christo Fufas, and the former Conservative MP Jane Stevenson. Also in Washington, DC for us is the chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. Greg, thanks indeed for being with us too. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. Well, let's move to our main news this evening. And history will be made when the crew aboard NASA's Artemis 2 moon flyby mission splashes down in the Pacific Ocean in a fireball return to Earth. But let's just take a moment to recognise the incredible achievements of this mission so far. It was the 1st of April when NASA's first crewed mission around the moon in more than half a century took off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Well, our very own Ben Leo was there.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
Wow.
There it goes, into space, to the moon, Jude. 4 people on there. Oh my gosh. Through the clouds. Yes. Come on. Oh, I'm getting emotional.
It was emotional. And President Trump also praised the team in a national address shortly after liftoff.
Let me begin by congratulating the team at NASA and our brave astronauts on the successful launch of Artemis 2. It was quite something.
Well, it was also the first day that the crew reported issues with the onboard loo.
NASA astronaut Christina Cook is also working through troubleshooting steps of the waste management system that's aboard the Integrity spacecraft. The toilet fan is reported to be jammed.
Well, day 2 of the mission saw, for the first time since Apollo 17 in 1972, humans leaving Earth's orbit. It was also the first time that we heard from the crew aboard.
We just kind of looked at each other as a crew. We have been to the moon before in 1969, 1968 through 1972. It's been a long time since we've been back. And I got to tell you, there is nothing normal about this. Sending 4 humans 250,000 miles away is a Herculean effort, and we are now just realizing the gravity of that.
Well, it was on day 3 of the mission that we saw what home looked like, with incredible pictures taken by the Orion crew. Well, this one was snapped by Mission Commander Reed Wiseman, showing the Terminator line, which marks where day turns to night. The crew also looked at this day, used this day to push on with preparations for that all-important lunar flyby, practicing how to ready the cabin for the big moment.
We took some pictures earlier today, and then after putting them on the computer to look closer, we found a feature. You know, the Grand Canyon of the moon is called Oriental Basin, and we were able to see the entire thing. And so it's clear that we are not on Earth because that feature is not all visible from Earth. And so it's already special, the view that we have. And yes, the Earth is quite small and the moon is definitely getting bigger.
Well, on day 4, the crew had their second course correction cancelled, and their toilet troubles persisted, forcing them to busy troubleshooting with the wastewater dump system after it failed to work the previous night. Orion's pilot, Victor Glover, also took manual control of the spacecraft, testing the capsule's performance in deep space and provided data about the spacecraft's handling qualities across different movements.
And Houston, we have some Earth and Moon viewers here who are putting in requests for different motions so they can see things in the window.
We're seeing them in the camera views and we're enjoying it. Look at those scientists go.
Well, it also marked the first time that the Artemis crew took their first look at the far side of the moon. On day 5, it was the spacesuit test. The crew's morning was almost entirely dedicated to testing the Orion crew survival system. Well, this is the suit that protects crew members during launch and re-entry to Earth, as well in the event of any emergency. Day 6 saw the crucial lunar flyby and was also the day that a new record was set, with the Artemis 2 crew breaking the current record for humans' farthest distance from the Earth.
Integrity crew. On April 15th, 1970, during the Apollo 13 mission, 3 explorers set the record for the farthest distance humans have ever traveled from our home planet. At that time, over 55 years ago, Lovell, Swigert, and Hayes flew 248,655 statute miles away from Earth. Today, for all humanity, you're pushing beyond that frontier. Integrity, over to you.
From the cabin of Integrity here as we surpass the furthest distance humans have ever traveled from planet Earth. We do so in honoring the extraordinary efforts and feats of our predecessors in human space exploration.
Well, it also saw this message from the President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Very special hello to Artemis 2. Today you've made history and made all America really proud, incredibly proud. We have a lot of things to be proud of lately, but this is there's nothing like what you're doing, circling around the moon for the first time in more than a half a century.
That was just part of a 13-minute conversation the President had with the crew. But we were also met with this incredible picture from the far side of the moon, echoing a similar picture that was taken by Apollo 8. Earth rise and Earth set. Day 7 was primarily off-duty time for the crew as the spacecraft exited the lunar sphere of influence and the first return trajectory correction was carried out, bringing the team back towards Earth on course. But on day 8, the crew were back in action, testing out their orthostatic intolerance garments. Goodness me, say that a few times. With which are designed to ensure proper blood flow for when the spacecraft enters Earth's gravity. Lots of G's. The crew also held a press conference where we found out this.
We have to get back. There's so much data that you've seen already, but all the good stuff is coming back with us. There's so many more pictures, so many more stories, and gosh, I haven't even begun to process what we've been through, and riding a fireball through the atmosphere is profound as well. So I have to answer that question later. I'm not sure, but I can tell you it's a lot, and lifelong memories. I'm going to be thinking about and talking about all of these things for the rest of my life, for sure.
Well, on day 9, cleaning up the inside of the cabin was the order of the day, and preparing for splashdown, which brings us to round about now. Eagerly awaiting that dramatic splashdown back to planet Earth, although splashdown might undersell what we're about to see. A fireball through the air, the temperature of the sun. My goodness me. Well, joining me in London is my panel of space expert Andy Lound, astrophysicist researcher Maggie Liu, the journalist and broadcaster Christo Fufas, and the former Conservative MP Jane Stevenson. But let's first speak to the chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, who's in our Washington studio. Greg, a very meaningful day for the United States of America. In all of those shots we saw inside the capsule, an American flag, a Canadian flag, and also a little flag saying 250, reminding us of this special anniversary year.
Yeah, it's perfect timing, Tom. And first of all, well done on the recap, on the 10-day recap. But yeah, it's big news here in the U.S. There are other distractions. There's other news items, and I was quite relieved tonight to hear that we were doing the entire show, maybe with some news breaks on this mission. And so it's great news. I can't wait till 8:07 Eastern time to see the splashdown, or roughly that time. So it's exciting news here. It's been a long time, as you mentioned in the recap. And this is a really exciting moment for America, and perfect timing with 250.
Oh, absolutely. And just to remind everyone, it's less than an hour now to go until we're expecting that historic splashdown moment. Greg, a lot of people will be looking at this and wondering, why has it taken this long? The last time this happened was 1972. We've had obfuscation, we've had different programs, we've had programs cancelled. Congress hasn't prioritised space flights.
Yeah, that is correct. And I mean, I think, we have to consider the national debt, which is now pushing $40 trillion. So that was a headache, even though it was a fraction of the debt back in the 80s when the program really slowed down. But they also had some other priorities in terms of space travel. So you had all kinds of, the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster was not a good moment. But that whole Space Shuttle program and the space stations, that was maybe not as exciting as circling the moon or landing on the moon, but it was really, constructive space exploration in itself for different reasons, possibly with more commercial applications. So, yeah, it's a long time coming. Those of us of a certain age remember Apollo 11, of course, in 1969, and Apollo 13. I've met Jim Lovell. I had lunch with him and with Jim and his wife and my daughter a few years ago. So it's part of our culture here. It's really exciting.
Greg, I've got to ask you about that. What was that like? What were his memories of going to the moon?
Yeah, it was fantastic meeting him, and this was probably in 2018 or 19, so he was older, but he remembered everything like it was yesterday. His wife, was really kind and talked about some of the clips from the movie. Everybody remembers Tom Hanks playing Jim Lovell in Apollo 13, and he said, repeated a lot of the lines and said they were actually true. It wasn't Hollywood really. They pretty much stuck to the script, and so that was an exciting time, and we were sad to see him go last year.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Although I believe he recorded an audio message for the crew this year, but before he passed, which is poignant that baton is moving on. Greg, we're going to be back with you in a little bit, but let me turn now to my panel here in London. Maggie, this is a big moment, not just for the completion of this mission, but frankly, this is going to test this heat shield with human beings behind it for the first ever time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a scary moment. You've said it. It's going to get to temperatures close to the temperature of the sun. It's going to be traveling at 32 times the speed of sound. It's scary times.
Scary times. But NASA seem to be comfortable with this. Should we be thinking this is going to go absolutely according to plan? It does seem strange that this is the first time that they're testing this design.
So this heat shield, the exact same heat shield, was tested with Artemis 1.
But that one had issues with it.
That one had issues. It didn't go to plan. It broke up, it cracked. But inside of that cabin, the temperature was perfectly fine. No changes there. However, that mission had a completely different re-entry kind of profile. It did like a skimming stone, kind of like, you know, the stones when you skip over water, did that to kind of dissipate some energy before it actually went down for the deep dive. And that, by dissipating this energy, you get a more precise kind of re-entry point. However, that means you're in this kind of high temperature, high stress on the heat shields for 20 minutes. Now they've changed the re-entry profile, taking a different route. There'll be less kind of duration of stress on the heat shields, only 13 minutes. And hopefully that means we won't get this cracking.
Well, our fingers will have to be crossed. But Andy, I mean, this is one of the problems with waiting 50 years to restart this. We lost a lot of that knowledge about how this stuff works. And crucially, I mean, we're looking on the screen of the heat shield from Artemis 1 and those big cracks, those chunks that were torn out of it, that was so concerning, that have changed the profile of the re-entry that we're going to see tonight. But frankly, this is one of the problems of waiting so long, institutional knowledge being lost, and it's a slightly different design of heat shield compared to...
Yes, one of the problems that the American space programme is they had a programme to put a man on the moon. To put a person on the moon and return them safely to the Earth, they had a nice, steady build-up with Mercury, Gemini, Apollo. Then the programme was cancelled. They went for a space station, which was the Skylab, which was based on a Saturn V rocket. Then they went for a completely different design for the space shuttle. A completely new design altogether, and change it. Then, of course, that programme's gone, so they're going to go to the moon, so the shuttle programme's gone, so that they're going for a different design now, although it's cobbled a little bit from the launch system using shuttle. And the Americans never have a consistent programme where they learn and do this steady development. The Russians, for instance, they're using in their Soyuz rocket exactly the same design they launched in the 1960s, but it's been slowly modified and upgraded.
Although looking at the Soyuz rocket, it's bloomin' cramped for people going up there, and it does look like something from the sort of Soviet era.
And they have this consistency, and that's really important. So you actually keep the same teams building it up, whereas in America, and that's because of the political system where you've just changed track at a certain point, and that doesn't help really. And this is where you have a problem. This is why private sectors are coming better into it, because politicians will love you one minute and then against you the next, and then we lose the programme. And so that's been America's programme. I may certainly say we've just had a special time marker going on here.
Yes.
The NASA's Deep Space Network has now handed over the communications now to the TDRSS satellite network, which means it's now within the global network satellite system. So it's getting really close to the Earth now. The geostationary satellites, it's now within the geostationary satellite system. So now this is another indication that we're getting very close.
So our communications will be a lot clearer with it until they're suddenly not, when it's part of this fireball. Jane, we've been speaking about politicians, perhaps with not the kindest sort of, I don't know, vibe, but crucially, this is a moment of inspiration, I suppose.
It is. When you were going through the recap, I just found myself smiling and smiling, because it is incredible. And I think in a world where we all get caught up with so many crises internationally and domestically, I think it is something so wonderful to see a return of men in space and a woman in space. So this is just spectacular. And to read, as a non-scientist, to read about things like the heat shield was quite concerning. So I'm very grateful Maggie's explained a little more about that to me and to our viewers. But I think the charring of the Artemis 1 panels on the front, it is, when you read it, it is concerning. And to think these 4 astronauts are coming down behind this now. But NASA, the research, I mean, to the average person, and indeed the average politician, or former politician, you can't sort of connect with the amount of people that go into making this mission a success and the amount of trust. And I was reading the biographies of the astronauts, and I would recommend, if anyone's sitting, waiting and wanting to do something, they are so inspirational. And the oldest man in space now, I think, is 50, two 50-year-olds, female astronaut who's in her late 40s. This is just really inspiring, I think, for those of us who aren't in our 20s anymore.
Yeah, no, that is actually an interesting thing about this mission. Of course, most of these people have been to space before, but only low Earth orbit. But it is interesting, the older age profile of these astronauts compared to those early Apollo missions when they were young men, young fighter pilots. And now it's people who perhaps have seen a bit more in their lives. Very, very interesting. I've got to ask you on the political side of this. One of the reasons why NASA sort of slowed down in its exploration, we saw human disasters. Yes. We saw 2 shuttles lost very, very publicly. Yes. It slowed the progress of the space program and perhaps turned people on to just how dangerous this could be. Heaven forfend, and we hope it doesn't, if something goes wrong tonight, do you sense that there might be a lacking of political will, or does the fact that there is now a geopolitical challenger in the shape of China racing to the moon, does that still keep political momentum behind this project?
I don't know. Let's hope we're not having that conversation in an hour's time at all. But I do think it has reignited people's interest in space exploration, and to see those incredible photographs from the far side of the moon. This is just like a science fiction that, you know, I'm old enough to remember, sadly, space shuttle disaster, and it was, I think I was fairly young. It did impact everybody, because the excitement about seeing the launch and then ending in tragedy was horrible.
That first one that was carrying a school teacher, and it was shown in classrooms across the United States, and they saw it break up on launch, just the most horrendous tragedy. And it does reinforce, I mean, the 2 shuttles that were lost, one on launch, one on return, the most jeopardous parts of these missions. Christo, let's talk about something a little bit happier.
Well, actually, can I just say on that point, though, I watched Challenger live in school as part of a project about space, and we were all so excited about it. It was one of my earliest memories from school, and the reason that we were into space was because people went to space. You need to go to space to get people into space, and it really struck home about how brave those people were. And you're absolutely right, the fact that it was Krista Bacall, I think her name was the school, I even remember her name from then, the school teacher that went in, and that was why so many schools were watching this launch, and we didn't even know at that point that it had exploded, because it looked like maybe the rockets had separated, so people were still watching in school. We were all watching it thinking, has something happened? So it's a real testament to the bravery of the people that go, but also how important this is, not only because we're actually learning stuff, but also in order to reignite people's interest in it, to have a new generation of people that want to go to space and explore. I have to say, when this mission started, I was way less enthusiastic today when it's ending, because you get to find out more, you get to see more of it. And so that is why this is so incredibly important, and also, we should say, dangerous. It is dangerous.
I was a little bit surprised 10 days ago how little buzz there was around this. The fact that humans were once again escaping Earth's low Earth orbit. I mean, our sort of gravitational pull of our planet. But people were actually going beyond that for the first time in half a century. And sort of it seemed like no one was caring. And yet, then the launch happened, and the next day, everyone was talking about it. It was all over the internet, all over the papers. You could almost hear people talking about it in public. And one of the biggest things, NASA produced a bunch of photographs that these astronauts have taken that are now some of the most popular iPhone wallpapers.
Well, actually, maybe that's perfect. This Instagram photo-obsessed age, maybe they're getting with the programme now about how on earth, because it does need to be sold to people. Some news stories need selling, and this needs selling with the images, with the amazing launch that we had. But I think you're absolutely right, in as much as perhaps in the run-up, people were a bit like, meh, you know, why would anyone do this? And it was only when they've actually done it, only when you have programmes like this that actually explain, like, the temperatures that they're going to be facing when they're on their way in. What's going on up there? The toilet, for goodness sake. I mean, I thank the Lord. I mean, I know it's funny, but thank goodness that's the only thing that's actually gone wrong. They will get back to Earth and be thrilled that it was just the loo, I hope.
Yes, and Andy, this is why this is so important. Not just to test every single thing about this spacecraft, because it really does need testing before the next moon landing, but also looking at the photographs that they've taken. The sort of inspiration that this generates for a new generation, the excitement that space is, dare I say it, cool again.
Yes, it is, and it's interesting to think that. I mean, I hear a lot of young people talking about the environment and things like that, and they're talking to people of my age and thinking, "I'm sorry, we've been there. We protested about the environment because we saw the first picture of the Earth, which was taken by a satellite in 1967, a globe of the Earth. Then the Apollo astronauts went around the moon and showed us it. Sorry, we were already out there protesting and talking about the environment on the Earth and to protect the Earth itself and see it as a global community."
It's no coincidence that the environmental movement kicked off in the late 1960s.
No.
And Greenpeace and all that sort of stuff, Woodstock. I mean, this is all coming at the same time that we're getting those early NASA missions.
Yes, it is. And if we can instill that feeling, I don't have rose-tinted spectacles. I understand what the world is and how it works. But nonetheless, if you can, it's almost getting into the spirit of humanity to get that actually motivated again. We can get people to think, oh, wait a minute, if we can achieve that, look at the problems down on here on Earth, which seem quite minuscule compared to those. We can solve these problems down here on Earth as well.
That is a very positive attitude to take. But Jane, of course, people will make the argument that we have lots of problems down here on Earth.
Yeah.
We've got wars. The cost of living is not getting better. Inflation, tax. Why are we messing around in the upper atmosphere?
Yeah, but I can't believe it's been half a century since people went up to the moon. It is incredible. Yes, the cost of living, everyone's depressed about so many things, but I do think this takes us out of it. Is something bigger than ourselves. It's something bigger than just our little time on the planet. This is crucial for looking at the surface of the moon, for finding out what's up there, for starting those steps towards getting a base on the moon. I know this has been toing and froing for many years now, but the potential to go to Mars, the potential to be further and faster. And I'm of the age that, you know, I remember Concorde. We felt like we'd gone backwards. Yes. Concorde stopped, and you thought, hang on a minute, we've made all this progress as humanity. It is. I think it brings us all together.
Isn't it mad that we had Concorde, we had these moon landings with the most basic analog technology. We now all have digital technology in our hands, but we've moved backwards when it comes to that kind of exploration.
I've got a theory about this, but it's going to have to wait until after the advert break. If you are just joining us, we are moments away from being even more history being made when the crew aboard Artemis 2, that flyby mission, splashes down in the Pacific Ocean. I should at this point say I misspoke. We're not having any advert breaks this hour. It's just too important for that. But as I was mentioning, that fireball return to Earth is moments away. But what does it actually entail?
Before entering the atmosphere, Orion's crew module separates from the service module. 12 thrusters ensure Orion is properly oriented at an altitude of about 75 miles from Earth's surface. Orion and the crew enter Earth's atmosphere at a speed of nearly 25,000 miles per hour. Decelerating at a rate up to 4 times the force of gravity, the crew will feel 4 times heavier than they do on Earth. Orion's heat shield protects the spacecraft from temperatures of about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about half as hot as the surface of the sun. To slow its descent, Orion begins a precise deployment sequence of 11 parachutes. 3 forward bay cover parachutes first separate the protective thermal cover that sits over the chutes. 2 drogues slow and stabilize the crew module, then cut free. 3 pilot chutes lift the 3 main parachutes, deployed at an altitude of 9,000 feet and traveling 130 miles per hour. These chutes slow the crew module to a speed of less than 20 miles per hour. After traveling more than 595,000 nautical miles, Orion splashes down in the Pacific Ocean, about 50 nautical miles from the California coast, just 16 minutes after entering Earth's atmosphere. After splashdown, a recovery team that includes the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and NASA approaches Orion. The team ensures it's safe for the crew to exit before divers help the astronauts onto an inflatable front porch, hoist them into helicopters, and fly to the recovery ship. Orion is towed into the ship for its return to Kennedy Space Center. Their mission complete, the crew is flown back to land and step on solid ground for the first time in 10 days.
Well, a portentous day. Joining me in London is my panel of space expert Andy Lound, astrophysicist researcher Maggie Liu, the journalist and broadcaster Christo Fufas, and the former Conservative MP Jane Stevenson. But let's bring in the chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, who's in our Washington studio. Greg, just listening to what is exactly going to take place in around half an hour's time, I mean, the temperature that this thing will reach is astonishing. The speed it is travelling is almost mind-boggling. It sort of is almost out of this world, pardon the pun, that we did this back in the 1960s and 70s.
Yeah, it's amazing with so much less sophistication in the equipment and the technology. So it's a testament to the brave astronauts of the 60s and early 70s, but also to these guys. Jane mentioned the age of these, at least the 2 American fighter pilots. I mean, they have flown every kind of fighter jet you can fly. They've been test pilots. They were both F-18 Super Hornet pilots, so they've landed on carriers, which is a really difficult thing to do. So they've seen danger before, and I think they're used to it. But I think also, you know, we have to consider it's just some of the physics of this. You mentioned the speed they're traveling. When they break through back in the atmosphere, they'll be going at 25,000 miles per hour, I think. At their top speeds, it's the equivalent, to put it in perspective, of flying from Los Angeles to New York in 6 minutes. So it's really incredible. And then on the other end, when the parachutes open and it's supposed to slow down, which it does, obviously, they're still going at 20 miles per hour when they hit the water, when they hit the Pacific Ocean. So that's quite the jolt for anyone, even these brave astronauts.
It certainly is, and I do think that sometimes we sort of almost skip over that word brave or pioneering or all of these things, but these words really do matter. They really do mean something when we think about what these people are actually going to go through over the course of the next 30 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, there was the early Apollo missions. One of them didn't even get off of the ground, and it blew up right on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral. So, yeah, there's danger from the get-go on these things. I don't know that there's ever been a real problem with the return, but it's still dangerous when you think about what they're doing and reducing that speed when they come out. In spite of the heat and everything else that they're going through, and then they hit the ocean at 20 miles an hour in a large metal container. Yeah. It's rough.
Very sadly, in 2003, there was a space shuttle that had a bit of its heat shield break off during launch, and they didn't notice this until it was too late. It was coming back in only from low Earth orbit, so lower speeds, less of an intense heat shield than Orion, this capsule will have to have. And that space shuttle broke up in the sky as the second disaster that the shuttle had, sort of making NASA pause shuttle flights, announce the end of the shuttle program. And that really put such a big slowdown on everything that was going on. There was then the Constellation program that was meant to get people back towards the moon, and then that was cancelled, and then there were sort of more delays and refits, and it's taken a long time to get here. Is this Washington, D.C.'s fault? Is this the fault of the global financial crisis? Who do we blame, Greg?
I'm not sure we should blame anyone. I mean, it's the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And in space exploration, you have to expect some defeats. You have to expect some agony. And so there might have been some short-sightedness when, after these disasters and Congress was pulling back, you always have that tug usually from the left. I'm not trying to get political, but of we should be giving this to welfare, we should be spending money domestically. But I think that's really short-sighted, and I think that we've had our ups and downs with this, but it's really great to see it back. And I think we'll have a much more powerful NASA now than we did even in 1969.
It's interesting that the new administrator of NASA, a guy called Jared Isaacman, is a self-made billionaire. He's run a really effective company before. He seems to be leading NASA a bit more like a sort of startup, focusing in on this moon mission, getting the whole team behind it. I mean, trying to bring more talent in-house, rewarding those who work for NASA with flights in his jet. I mean, some sort of start-up behaviour there from the new administrator.
Absolutely, and why not? Look at what Elon Musk has done in space. I mean, private companies have been launching satellites since the 90s, maybe even the 80s. I mean, it's a phenomenal contribution from the private sector. And look, the President of the United States is not a politician, he's a businessman. And so you see in this administration and many other, especially Republican administrations, people from the private sector that add such value, and it's great to see that the administration.
Greg, I'm going to interrupt you here.
In.
We're seeing separation of the Orion capsule from the other stage of it. I'm going to turn to Andy Lound, who's with me in the studio. This is an important moment.
Yeah, this is an important moment. It's 1 minute later than the put under the system, but they've now separated the main capsule from the service module. So the service module will now eventually re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. They'll do some manoeuvres for the capsule itself to make sure it's clear of it, to make sure it's in the right position. But you can see the footage now, which is the bits and pieces which you would expect to come off from the separation. There's all sorts of paint flecks and all sorts of things.
A lot of people will be very concerned that we're seeing lots of flecks of bits of stuff.
It's an interesting thing, because paint flecks, when they come off, are still travelling at great speed. I mean, fortunately, the momentum of these will take them through into the atmosphere and they'll burn up. Things that come off in the atmosphere, in orbit, of course, stay in orbit.
Yes. So and tiny little things can be very, very dangerous if they're not tracked.
17,500 miles per hour, that will could put a hole through a spacecraft. So you have to have special protections on spacecraft. I mean, the space shuttle windows were pitted by bits of paint that actually hit the windscreen at different times. So and there's a lot of junk up there. The small bits can be just as dangerous as the big bits. So you have to be really careful.
Perhaps more so, because you can see a big bit coming, or at least you can track a big bit and move out the way.
Exactly. I mean, some of the leaks that you've had on the Soyuz spacecraft could have been caused simply by small bits puncturing their systems.
Can I ask Andy something? You mentioned space junk, and when I was in Parliament, we were talking about this, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about how we clean up bits of space, or do you think
there's a number of British companies, a couple of British companies and universities have actually worked on systems of actually coupling up with satellites. One thing you can do, as the satellite is moving in orbit, you fire a laser at it. It vaporises a section of it and acts as a thruster, slows it down. Once you slow down in orbit, you fall, and you can actually, therefore, enter the Earth's atmosphere safely. And what's called the satellite graveyard, it's in the middle of the Pacific, it's where we dump a lot of stuff. The alternative, there's a net system that was developed also by the British, which has been tested, and also a harpoon system, whereas you can actually harpoon a satellite, then the thruster on your satellite fires and brings it down safely to go. And we need to clean up there, because it's getting to a point where it'll be too dangerous to launch spacecraft, because we're likely to run into something.
And does NASA have to follow where areas of junk
Yes, there's monitoring going on all the time. Monitoring going on all the time. There's an international convention that you must, if you put a third stage up, there's a lot of third stages flying around, that they must be brought back safely. China doesn't seem to bother with that, which is quite interesting. So a lot of big pieces of Chinese spacecraft which fall down uncontrolled altogether, which is really dangerous.
That is a concern, Maggie, because there are now tens of thousands of satellites orbiting our planet.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an effect called the Kessler syndrome, and that is that if you have a big piece of space junk that crashes into another, then that will make loads of little bits which will go off and crash into other bits, and it will exponentially scale. Thankfully, we have NASA and ESA constantly tracking from the
ESA
ground.
is the European Space Agency.
Yes, ESA is the European Space Agency, tracking a lot of this space junk. We can track things up to a few centimetres inside, but anything less than that, so those paint flecks, etc., they are still travelling at incredibly fast speeds, and we aren't really able to track those.
And Andy mentioned that there are a couple of Soyuz Russian spacecraft that go up and transport astronauts to the International Space Station that had some leaks and some problems and some holes that could have come from these untrackable tiny bits of space junk.
Not even the Soyuz modules, but the International Space Station has countless holes.
Really?
And they can't even find them because they're so small. They just know the oxygen and the pressure levels are dropping, and they know that there's loads of holes. They just can't find them.
And yet we've had astronauts continuously living in this space station since the year 2000, since the turn of the millennium, and it's full of holes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit like the sort of pioneering days of transatlantic shipping, where just every now and again you'd have to send a cabin boy down below to sort of cork the hull and sort of stop the leaks. I mean, I suppose the analogy is a little bit silly, but I mean these are the sort of pioneering days of spaceflight.
Yeah, but I think that's one of the contributing factors that the ISS will be decommissioned in the coming years. It's just not sustainable anymore.
Too many holes. Wow, I mean, that is...
Teabag.
You learn something new every single day, my goodness me. Christo.
I'm just obsessed with this timeline.
Yes.
Now. You know, I'm just obsessed with it now. I'm just like reading now that it's 7:37, so I don't know if they're late, which is their time. So apparently there's this 18-second crew module raise burn, which is going to try and get the entry angle. Has that happened yet? I'm obsessed. I can't see it.
Yeah, they haven't said that they've done that there. It's quite an important element, actually, because they need to do that. They will have done it. It will be operation. It's probably been 0038 when they've done it, because they were a minute separating, a minute late doing the separation. I say a minute late. There is a wiggle room where they actually do these things. So it's probably going to be 0038. They'll do, which is probably happened now, and they'll be just really getting it into the right position now they've done it, so that it's got to enter the atmosphere, of course, at an angle.
But were, Andy, the cameras through which we were looking at the capsule on the service module or on the Orion spacecraft itself?
No,
just to explain to people, there's two different parts of the spacecraft.
Yes, this is the service module here. And what you actually have, you've got cameras mounted actually on the ends of the solar panels,
right?
Which is quite neat, really. And that means they can. That's why you get these great views of the rear, the thruster end, looking at the Earth, because there's a camera mounted there. And in fact, Chris, the astronaut Cook, she actually manoeuvred one of these cameras so they could photograph herself in the window of the spacecraft, which I thought was kind of cool.
If you pick up the Orion spacecraft and sort of reconnect them, of course they've disconnected now, but if you reconnect them, are there any cameras at all on the outside of the Orion? Because I suppose it's going to get so hot, it's going to have a ball of plasma around it that they might not be able to have
most of the camera systems, which was taken automatically, are actually on the rim here, so we've lost those now.
Right.
So they will be taking imagery through the windows. There's a quite possibility. Front windows have to be generally kept clear, but they could take imagery through those. I mean, very much modern cameras are now small compared to the ones that were being used on Apollo, where they had to have quite clunky sorts of pieces of kit.
Yeah, there's a remarkable bit of audio, I think, from Apollo 8, the first time that human beings went around the moon. And they're supposed to be taking pictures of the surface of the moon. But I forget who it was. One of the astronauts just saw the Earth appear from behind the moon. And it was just this remarkable image of sort of the Earth just rising up. And you get this famous Earthrise photograph, and in the audio he's sort of saying, someone grab me the camera, grab me the camera, I need to take this, even though it wasn't a scheduled photograph to take. It's this human instinct to grab just a very beautiful picture, which is perhaps now one of the most famous images ever taken by Apollo.
Do you know, I was just reading all of the blurb about it, and actually that's one of the reasons why they don't send robots. One of the frequently asked questions on the national website was, why don't they just send robots? And they said, because we want human instincts, we want actually some human interaction as well as just rather getting data from robots. Can I ask, I don't know if it's a silly question, but how, because obviously while it's in space it's got to be attached, the Orion to the service module perfectly, but then it just broke away so so easily.
It's designed to separate so easily. Yes, it's just.
I mean, how do they do that?
Well, there's little explosive bolts on the side which fire.
Sorry, they've just fired explosions at the spacecraft.
Only small ones, less violent than the ones on Apollo. I assure you, they were very violent.
That's why they were the pink flecks, because there's been a literal explosion.
And also, you get the thrusters on the service module also fire to push it away.
Yes.
So then you get these travelling together. You let it go. This fires the throwaway and gives it some distance. Then this will fire its thrusters then to get into its own position. So you make sure they're nicely separated.
Well, so you've got thrusters on two crafts mixed with explosives around one of them. Now we know why we were talking about it being dangerous.
Could put fireworks on as well. Just
goodness,
unbelievable.
Not for the faint-hearted, is it at all? But Maggie, then the service module will be breaking up in the atmosphere, I suppose, over the coming hours.
Yeah, that's the plan. It will break up even before it hits the ocean. So,
and that emphasises, I suppose, again, the danger of Orion and why it needs this heat shield, because without this heat shield, it would be breaking up in the atmosphere to be... I mean, the atmosphere protects us from so many meteorites, I suppose. What's the difference between a meteor and a meteorite? I can never remember. Is it the size?
So a meteorite is something that we find on the ground. So what we're really talking about is asteroids when they're in space. So asteroids, pieces of rock and dust in space, when they come through our atmosphere and light up like the fireballs that we see, the shooting stars that we see, that's when we have meteors. And then when they land on the ground, we can find them, they're meteorites.
And it's our relatively thick atmosphere that protects us from being just utterly cratered like the moon is with no atmosphere.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just quite reassuring, even though in some of these photographs that we've seen, we see just how thin the atmosphere looks, sort of around the Earth. And some of these photographs that the crew have taken, I'm just looking on the screen. Sorry to interrupt myself. It looks like we're looking through the window of the Orion capsule there, although it looks like perhaps we've got a bit of a static frame there in the video. It might have just had some connection. Oh no, things are moving. It looks like that is a camera that is pointed through the window of the Orion spacecraft, pointing out into space, and we might be able to see some reflections of what's going on inside the capsule there. Very, very interesting indeed. Now, just as a reminder, we are moments away from even more history being made when the crew aboard NASA's Artemis 2 mission, flyby moon mission that is, splashes down in the Pacific Ocean in a fireball return to Earth. But what happens if this splashdown doesn't go to plan? Well, one of the major concerns for NASA is that the heat shield, which acts as a protective layer on the bottom of the Orion spacecraft, it absorbs and deflects the extreme heat generated. Well, as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, it's supposed to absorb and deflect all of that heat, that plasma fireball. Well, returning from the moon as the Orion slams into the atmosphere, air in front of the capsule compresses and heats up, creating temperatures of about 2,700 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than lava. That's the heat that the heat shield itself withstands. Now, as for the heat of the plasma around it, and the reason it sort of burns off to give it that safety, that's 10,000 degrees Celsius. But to survive this, Orion uses this specially designed heat shield made from a material called Avcoat. Instead of just resisting heat, it slowly burns and erodes away. It's a bit like brake pads on a car. That carries heat with it and protects the astronauts inside. But of course, if this shield fails, the underlying metallic structure could melt, rupture, and even disintegrate. There's no way, of course, for the astronauts to escape if that happens. We pray it doesn't. Joining me in London is my panel of space expert Andy Lound, astrophysicist, researcher Maggie Liu, journalist and broadcaster Christo Fufas, and the former Conservative MP Jane Stevenson. Andy, we've spoken a little bit about the danger of this mission so far. There have been tragic cases where NASA missions and indeed Russian missions have sadly lost astronauts.
That's correct. The Apollo 1 fire is the one which a lot of people recall in history. A ground test, a practice before launch, all-up wet test. It went wrong when a fire broke out inside the spacecraft. Pure oxygen environment. The astronauts, fortunately, were asphyxiated and not burnt to death. They couldn't get the door open because it was not designed to be opened easily from the inside. And that led to a whole redesign of the Apollo program and the design of the spacecraft itself. We've also had a Russian disaster where, when they were testing their spacecraft, parachute system failed and an astronaut was killed when it just simply plunged into the ground. Everything had worked well, but the parachute system didn't operate, so they plunged straight into the ground. So that was a disaster. Apollo 13 was a very fortunate survival because they managed to save the day and brought them all back, which showed the incredible robustness of a 1960s technology, to be quite honest. Quite incredible, really. But we did also have, of course, the two shuttle disasters. And both shuttle disasters, to a certain degree, certainly the second one to a certain degree, but definitely the first one was caused by a political issue, because the Congress was thinking of cutting the budget to the space shuttle program, and they said, stop delaying your launches. And so we delay launches because of safety things. Yes, but a delayed launch costs us hundreds of millions of dollars, and therefore they broke their own rules to launch in an over-cold environment, which led to the failure of an O-ring, which led to the burning into the hydrogen tank, which led to the explosion, which killed 7 astronauts.
It does really show the jeopardy that is facing. But Maggie, I suppose we should emphasise just how much testing this has all been under, although this testing is on Earth for the most part.
A lot of the testing has been on Earth. We talked previously about Artemis 1, and that testing was in space. Yeah, even if this fails, there's going to be kind of like a little bit of room for kind of heat with the carbon fibre. And then the astronauts, even if they're heated inside, they can still last within like over 100 degrees Celsius within the cabins, within their suits. So there is a little bit of leeway to play with. Hopefully this goes smoothly, but not all is lost.
And that's an important thing to note. They've got out of what they're normally wearing, and they are in full pressurised space suits, similar to what we'll remember Neil Armstrong wearing on the surface of the moon.
Full pressurised suits with oxygen, with kind of a lot of heat proofing, something that will keep them alive for 6 days if they needed to.
Wow.
Also, like, it's not just the heat shields that they're kind of that we need to be wary of. There is also the parachutes that Annie talked about. The parachutes on this thing. 4 different types of parachutes, 11 parachutes in total, the largest being 7 meters in diameter size, weighing over 100 kilograms. Like, these all have to deploy. There's a lot of things that need to go well for this to work out.
Wow. A lot of people will be sitting here and thinking, parachutes? Really? Parachutes? I mean, we're used to seeing Falcon 9 rockets from SpaceX and Blue Origin's rockets as well land with sort of on a pillar of flames. That I know there were some early tests of the Dragon spacecraft from SpaceX coming down with thrusters, but instead they opted for parachutes. Why do we always keep returning back to parachutes? It seems so antiquated.
They work.
They work. Yeah,
that helps.
They work.
I imagine they're quite cheap as well. They're cheap and they work, maybe.
I don't know if
you're
they're
putting
cheap.
thrusters on a vehicle, that means you're having to put fuel on the vehicle.
Right.
OK, weight.
Yeah.
You want to reduce as much weight as you possibly can. It's also another complication. Parachute systems, they understand parachute systems, they operate very successfully. You're using nature to bring you down slowly, then use that. It doesn't cost you any energy, apart from losing energy to the spacecraft as it falls. So it's ideal, really, for what you want. Bringing back the big pieces back, you'd have to use thrusters because the weight of them is just too great. And you're not actually adding anything to those spacecraft, the Falcon rockets, when they come back, and the Starship. And that's because they're using the residual fuel, which is already there anyway. And that used to be just wasted. They're using that now to bring the vehicle back. So there's no extra weight in that.
But that's because it is a massive... I mean, the Starship is the size of I don't know how many story tall building. I mean, it's just the most enormous thing.
It's phenomenal.
Whereas the Orion spacecraft, it's about the height of a human being, maybe a little bit taller?
The spacecraft itself, of course, yeah. I mean, it's just a little bit taller than the old Apollo vehicle. So it's a reasonable height. But yes, if you're looking at Starship, which is the future picture looks like a human spaceflight. That could have technically carry 100 people.
Wow.
But landing things like that is difficult as well. We've seen how many iterations before they've been able to successfully land.
And we're in a bit of a lull of Starship progress at the moment, but we're expecting another test, I think, next month?
4 to 6 weeks, yeah.
4 to 6 weeks.
And that's version 3, because they're very satisfied with what's happened so far, so now it's version 3, which was always the design test plan. It's a design test plan. Test it, see what goes wrong, redo it, test it, see what goes wrong, and then you move on to the next iteration. So they're doing it in a very sensible way.
And interestingly, Starship, or at least a lunar version of it, which is being built by SpaceX, Elon Musk, is one of the 2 options for the lunar lander that NASA will procure to land human beings back on the moon in 2028. Interestingly, though, we haven't yet seen either SpaceX or Blue Origin, that's Jeff Bezos' company, actually sort of, fly a lander up and test it yet. That comes next year.
Yeah. That is the plan. Artemis 3 will be testing these landing and docking as well, docking of the landers in orbit.
And that's in orbit around the Earth. Why is that?
So that they can test that it works before they send something so expensive to the moon and realise, actually, we can't get this working.
Right. It makes sense to sort of test it in that low Earth orbit environment.
Can I just say that we're just about a minute away from the communications blackout?
Yeah.
Let's listen into what NASA is having to say about that.
And we have crossed the threshold, now entering the Earth's atmosphere. We're at 400,000 feet, traveling 34,800 feet per second.
Well, as we can hear there, we have now crossed the threshold into Earth's atmosphere.
Time to splash down, 13 minutes, 10 seconds.
13 minutes and 10 seconds to splash down. And just look how large the Earth looks in the window of the Orion spacecraft here, and how small the Earth looked just a few days ago when it was 250,000 miles away.
Communications blackout.
And as you saw that blue screen from the window of the spacecraft, that shows that blackout period of communications has begun. Maggie, this blackout is because that heat is starting to build up.
The heat is building up. It's ionizing the kind of air around the spacecraft, creating this super hot plasma, incredibly more hot than the actual heat shield will feel, and that is causing this communication blackout.
Andy, I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
We're looking at a black screen here with a tiny sort of speck in the distance. Could this be some sort of very zoomed-in view of the spacecraft from Earth?
It's quite possible, because they should be able to actually pick it up from the ground, and they do that sometimes. And they're asking a lot of people to try and do that. They could actually track it with equipment, which would be quite interesting.
This is really interesting, because we didn't get this view of the Apollo program.
Not this early in Apollo. We did actually pick it up, but not as early as this. But this is the situation now where you've got the spacecraft now travelling at 23,840 miles per hour, 2,760 degrees centigrade is now hitting that heat shield. This is the critical moment now.
Wow, and it is. I find it absolutely gobsmacking that it's at the very upper atmosphere, and yet we clearly had a camera there with such powerful zoom that even though it was just a speck, we could see it just up there in the sky.
And how long does the blackout schedule to last?
6 minutes.
6. So after that, we'll feel a bit of relief. Will we get pictures then from inside?
You'll get radio communication, you'll get telemetry from the spacecraft as it's coming down. Radar systems will be switched on to detect it, and it's important then to receive communications with the astronauts to make sure they've passed through safely.
Yes.
That the vehicle has come through. I mean, there was 3 Soviet cosmonauts were killed on one of the missions once, and it came through the atmosphere fine. But they never got any communication with the cosmonauts, and when they were on the ground, they didn't wear spacesuits, and they'd lost everything.
Gosh.
I mean, we are looking now at this.
It's a graphic, I think.
That's a visualisation there, a sort of 3D graphic of what is taking place, because, of course, no direct connection with the spacecraft as we speak. But my goodness me, this is the moment of maximum jeopardy of the return of this spacecraft to Earth. 6 minutes of no communications. Christo, this is just the most astonishing and almost excruciating time where everyone just has to hold their fingers and pray.
You touched on this earlier, that I think in our verbos, in our language, we really overplay legend, historic, all of this stuff, whereas this is actually it. This is absolutely historic. This is unprecedented. It's all of those words we overuse, and they're fully appropriate in this moment. And you're right, it's almost unbearable, because again, in our age where we're so used, since this happened, to being able to communicate with everyone at every time, you know, right, left and centre, the idea that you would have at such a crucial time no communication is, I'll use the word again, excruciating.
Can I add that, like, we've been following so closely with these astronauts. These feel like our friends.
Yes.
We've been attached to them.
Absolutely.
We know what music they like. We know, like, their personalities. It just feels really close. Whereas back in the day with Apollo, they wouldn't have all this live streaming on all the time and this closeness and connection.
If you want reality television, this is how it should be.
Yeah, it's great. What role models, though? And school kids getting involved, and they interviewed some children on the radio as I was driving in, and it's fantastic that those children are going to see these role models in a world where some of the role models children have are questionable. These are real heroes, and do read their biographies if you're sitting at home listening to the media blackout from the space pod.
And that is an important point, that so often I think that children sort of look towards those role model figures.
We're just talking because on the NASA feed it's got the miles from Earth, and they're going up as well as down. So it got down to about 30 miles, and then it went back up to 50 or 60 miles, and then it went back down to 30 miles.
This is this manoeuvre where they actually go up and come down. And the idea is to lose a lot of energy doing that, to make it safer to coming down. The fact that we're picking that up, that's what they're doing, is a good sign. It means everything's manoeuvring as it should be manoeuvring.
Goodness me. But of course, one of the issues for Artemis 1 was it spent a lot of time doing that, getting cold and hot, and that created some of the problems with the heat shield.
Yeah, the angle was they thought was just too much for it, and it just put too much pressure on that particular design of heat shield. But as Maggie said absolutely rightly, you know, the capsule was still okay. It's just that from the engineering point of view, they'd rather it didn't do that.
Yes.
So it's one of those extra safety things. Let's not do that again.
Although, of course, I mean, this is not exactly the same type of heat shield that was used with the Apollo programme.
No,
that had asbestos in it. And there were regulations saying they couldn't use asbestos this time round.
It was also a carbon-carbon, which is very nice, and it's a more homogeneous shield as well, which I think is nicer because you would have really had a solid shield almost. But it just burns off layer after layer after layer after layer, and as it comes through, you've got enough layers on so it doesn't reach the spacecraft. So it's a good system.
We're seeing all sorts of different views of Orion now. I mean, this looks like it is some sort of infrared imagery, perhaps, again, of a ground-based telescopic camera of some description. But again, I mean, Maggie, we are just sort of grasping at straws here, trying to glean information because we have this communications blackout.
It's a really tense time. I feel like so nervous about it. Like I said, feeling so close with them, just watching their every move over the last 10 days. It's,
Yeah, and you can really see the sort of choppy feed there that we have. Yeah. So that glowing light in the middle is the capsule.
It's the image you want to see. What you don't want to see is a number of bits.
Yes,
What you want to see is one bit coming through.
So that there is one sort of glowing white bit, as far as we can see, means that things are going well. But my goodness me, I mean, as I say, grasping at straws, very little information that we have. And despite all of the computer screens and the big data screens and all of the wizardry and technology that these people have, they are also going of that sort of telescopic image of one white bit being okay. I mean, they will be having almost as little information as we do.
Yes, they do, and they've just got to sit through it and wait. It's the most nerve-wracking time imaginable. I mean, you can imagine when it happened with Apollo 8 doing it. It was a nightmare when the first time they did it.
I'm just being told that we've got communication re-established now.
We must be
Orion capsule. I mean, this is a big success. The most dangerous moment of the return to Earth we are now through, and we are 19 nautical miles to splashdown. Maggie, this could come earlier than we thought.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it depends a lot on the upper atmosphere. If the upper atmosphere, I mean, the upper atmosphere isn't consistently thick. You could be through an area where suddenly it's, for whatever reason, it's slightly thinner, less disturbance, so it's ploughed through it quite quickly. And that's nothing unusual in that. That's a normal practice.
Can I ask a non-sciencey question? When will the parachutes be deployed?
Parachutes will be deploying. Technically, 0103 will be when it starts deploying the drogues. And they'll pull out the first set of parachutes, which will then slow it down. And then
is that up like 20,000 feet or something? Isn't it ridiculously high that they did the parachutes?
Yes. I mean, once you go down, you're looking at that. And the idea of these two large 23-foot drogue chutes, which are pulled out by a couple of chutes already, that will slow it down to about just 200.
I'm just going to say we can now make out the shape of the capsule. In this, it's 50,000 feet above the surface of the Earth.
Wow.
We can see it hurtling through the sky with the most remarkable shot. And my goodness me, I don't know if this is some robotics or an amazingly accurate cameraman, but what a marvellous picture. Hurtling through the sky, intact, those 4 astronauts reigniting an age of deep space exploration as they come down to Earth. Let's hope these parachutes will deploy correctly, that these 11 parachutes that are on board this miraculous spacecraft that has survived heats of that are equivalent to the surface of the sun, and those shoots are deploying. Those early shoots are deploying. We should see further parachutes come, but my goodness me, there it is through the clouds.
2 good drogue shoots.
The speed of it, when you see the clouds, you can get
some NASA commentary.
Next up, the deployment of pilot parachutes that will pull the main chutes out. Time to splash down 3 minutes and 10 seconds.
Now these parachutes, as Maggie, you were just saying, just remind us what are these actually made of?
According to flight dynamics.
They're made of a material called Kevlar, super strong material.
It's what's used in bulletproof vests.
Yeah, exactly.
And we can see that those sort of primary parachutes, we should see later parachutes after these parachutes.
Passing through 10,000 feet.
We just heard NASA say they're 10,000 feet above the surface of the Earth.
4 different types of parachutes to be deployed.
And again, we've been following this capsule from remarkably high. And there we go, the second deployment.
There we go. Whoa, there she goes.
Main chute deploy.
Main chute's out.
There's one of them that looks a little bit flapping there.
Yeah.
And now it's widening out.
Yeah, there was an issue when Skylab's crew, the last Skylab crew, the Apollo Soyuz crew, the Apollo spacecraft came back with they had a chute that fell to open. 3 really good chutes.
Wow, they look like Tunnock's tea cakes there. And
good 3 main chutes, good reefing, good descent.
And after a little bit of worry there with one of them, they have all deployed absolutely marvellously. It's looking like this is going to be a textbook mission.
Yeah.
But it is almost serene. You sort of forget just how far, fast and hot this capsule has come from, this capsule has been.
It's graceful now. It's beautiful.
It's strange to see it gracefully drift after travelling 25,000 miles per hour.
Its crew sounding
and using Earth's atmosphere to drop it down.
They've said the crew are sounding hale and hearty, which is fantastic.
That is very good that they've got clear communication there with the crew. And now it's just that final splashdown into the Pacific.
20 miles per hour in the water is a bit of a bump, apparently.
a bit of a bump. Well, we know they are strapped in.
Yeah.
And if this is a reminder to wear your seatbelt, I don't know what is.
But also, they have been doing 28,000 miles an hour, so I imagine the 20
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadiq Khan's speed limit in London is coming.
Sadiq Khan is looking at their speed and salivating as we speak.
Goodness me. Well, these majestic parachutes high above this, and it is so reminiscent for those of us who've seen the Apollo splashdowns, I mean, it looks almost identical. If you were to show this to someone in 1972, they would absolutely
understand it. Yes, it's a similar sort of process, and we've gone back to an older process, which was thought to be fully understood and expected. But if you change the engineering design, then it will alter.
And we can see this, I think this is an infrared camera, we can see just little sparks of heat around it.
Yes, it's heat, because they dissipate anything left in their tanks, hydrazine, things like that is ejected. That will appear there as heat.
Right, so these are from the sort of thrusters on the sides of...
Well, you're just probably releasing material that they need to release. Heat is being released from the vehicle as she drops down. Right. Because you now obviously have to have an air circulation system.
Is that so that when it hits the water, there's no gases?
Yeah, you need that because you can't recover them if you've got any hydrazine left in the thrusters, which could be leaking because it's dangerous, kill you and badly injure you. So that's so the retrieval crews don't get damaged by anything. So and there's a process of switching everything off and getting it prepared.
Just noting this, we are still looking from underneath. Yes, we are. For a moment, I thought we might be looking. Oh, whoa!
Splash. There we go.
There we have it.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.
It's a mission complete from NASA. Astronauts back down on Earth at sea level, safe and sound.
Crew module uprighting system to maintain that orientation. A perfect bullseye splashdown for Integrity and its 4 astronauts.
And as their NASA command centre has been saying, perfect bullseye splashdown, well within the sight of all of those cameras there. And now a mission to go and collect those astronauts.
And what are they doing in the module now? Are they switching things off? Are they just waiting? What do they do?
They're having a moment.
Like a gin and tonic.
The vehicle must make sure it's orientated correctly, because if it's upside down, they've got to make sure it orientates. There's a system on board to make it reorientate. There's inflatables on the top which can fire, and that'll re-inflate, so it's upright. Otherwise, you'll fall down into the thing because you've got gravity now. They'll take themselves a moment. Instructions are coming in to slowly switch things off, check out all the cabin is all right, open the vents to make sure ventilation is correct. So there's a lot of check procedures now to go through, which takes quite a few minutes to get everything switched off, make sure the batteries are off, so to make sure there's no risk of fire, all the usual processes you're doing to switch the thing, close the thing down, essentially. And of course, NASA do not celebrate yet. You do not celebrate until they are physically on the ship. Then you celebrate.
I suppose there are moments of danger if the water could get in, if before they are airlifted out. Yes. And I think everyone can remember the Apollo missions where they're sort of put into a sort of basket hanging underneath the helicopter.
Yes. Yeah, really nerve-wracking exercise.
And I mean, it is just sort of really reminding us all of those remarkable scenes from the late 1960s, early 1970s.
In Mercury, Gus Grissom's spacecraft, he blew the door off too early. He says it was an accident. The spacecraft filled full of water, and they had to rescue him because he could have drowned. Wow. And the spacecraft then sank to the bottom of the ocean. Since been recovered many years later. Strange enough, he's in a museum. But he's nicknamed his spacecraft the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Well, we're hearing that all of the crew members are ship-shape, but of course they'll have been in their EVA suits or their pressurised suits. I suppose they'll have to. Those suits aren't really practical for flying up to a helicopter, so they might have to change into sort of civilian clothing or something a bit similar.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the procedure is for that, but they would certainly want to come out of those suits now because the temperature would be too hot for them in that, for starters. NASA, in the Apollo
maneuverability.
Yeah, so in Apollo, they actually had an issue with that, where they've realised they got far too hot once they landed back on Earth because they're in the South Pacific. It's warm down there, and the humidity's high, so they'll really want to get out of that and stabilise themselves.
And although we are 11 minutes past 1 in the morning here in London, over there in the Pacific, it's a lovely roughly 5 p.m. or just after 5 p.m. Pacific time. So some lovely afternoon sun just shimmering across the water. And just to pick up on something, Andy, that you said, that they are experiencing gravity now.
Yes.
Which is just sort of the most remarkable thought, that for the last 9 and a bit days, they have not been experiencing gravity.
No, they've experienced weightlessness. The movement of their spacecraft has counteracted the pull of gravity, so gravity's pulled them around, but they haven't actually felt their weight, which has been an interesting thing when they come back down to Earth. But they've done it before, apart from one. They've done it before, and therefore they'll understand how it feels to be back, which is quite a feeling, apparently, when you suddenly realise, oh, wait a minute, things aren't as fun as they used to be.
A lot of those early Apollo astronauts found that they needed to have sickness tablets and all sorts, and there were some sort of embarrassing communications to NASA about their sort of stomach problems.
Yes, one of the things which was interesting is the Soviet cosmonaut commented on it once. If you look at the menu, they had lots of peppers and curry powders and things like that, because you lose a sense of taste when you're in weightlessness for some reason. You lose that. And what they did was they spiced it up with curries. One of the cosmonauts got back, forgot, and piled loads of curry powder on his meal, and he nearly burned his mouth out.
Oh no! But this is strange. I suppose you're completely disorientated. The fluid in your ear canals is all upside down and whatever, and so people do get a sort of seasickness, but space sickness.
We saw them inside the capsule when they were up there, and they did all look quite puffy because of the fluid all rushing to their heads, and now it's all going to be coming back down again. But on that gravity issue as well, like, a lot of astronauts forget that there is gravity here, so they'll just leave things and then they'll just think that they want to. They don't. And
because they can be drinking. Well, I suppose they can't really be drinking like that. They'll be sipping out of a cup, but yeah, they could be holding a pen and just sort of leaving it there, and then oh dear. I mean, I suppose that's just sort of muscle memory that's hard to forget. Although maybe a bigger problem for people that have stayed months-long stays up in the International Space Station rather than a sort of week and a half trip around the moon.
Christina Cook was on the ISS for like over a year.
Nearly a full year,
yeah. And I suppose, a year of sort of just leaving your jam up in, just conveniently spinning in space is, I suppose, such a strange sort of sensation. At what point are we expecting the helicopter to get to the... I mean, it does seem that there is some sort of helicopter that's looking down, otherwise we wouldn't have these pictures.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take about 40 minutes to extract them, is what it's been said, to extract them so they can get them out, get them onto the ship and get themselves ready. The ship then, which is an amphibious vehicle, it has a dock at the back. It's an amphibious dock ship, and that can actually go in and it can actually bring the spacecraft then into the dock area of the ship. Americans designed the ship actually very similar to our old Intrepid and Fearless amphibious ships, very similar to that, where the stern of it can actually sink and it can actually act as a dock, and that's how they bring these spacecraft in now, which is much better than trying to lift it with a helicopter.
Wow, yes, I suppose they're pretty heavy, although they're designed to be as light as possible, they're pretty heavy still to lift with the helicopter.
It's just more convenient way of doing
so this is a big difference to how Apollo...
That's going to be a big difference, bringing how you get the capsule back in. And if you look at the way Dragon is brought back, they leave the astronauts in the capsule and wait till they actually bring it onto their dock ship, and then carefully bring them out on couches.
Now, the Americans have always done this in a very different way to the Russians.
Yes.
Because the Russians land on land.
Yes, they do.
And the Americans prefer to land on water.
Yes.
What's the advantage of either?
Political. The Americans have the largest navy in the world, and therefore they can drop it into the sea. The Russians are concerned about that, but they have the largest land area in the world, in Asia, in the old Soviet Union, and therefore for them, for political reasons and security reasons, they felt drop them onto on their territory is how they felt they preferred to do it.
Even though it might carry that extra bit of danger?
Yes, their system seemed to have worked very well. They've had a couple of errors, but the errors were caused by... one major error was by parachute failure, but that would have been the same issue if we'd been at sea anyway.
So actually, perhaps there's not that much difference between the effectiveness of either technique?
It's safer into the ocean. Overall, it's a safer drop down, but the Russians have been very successful with what they've achieved. So yeah, it's horses for courses. What do they prefer? They're used to that technique. They're going to stick with that technique. Of course, the capsule that they use for the Soyuz is a different design to this. It's a very interesting design. It's not just simply this like a lozenge type shape. It's a bit more upright.
And sorry to put you on the spot, do we know what the Chinese use?
Yeah, the Chinese use a system very similar to the Soviets, to the old Soviets.
Well, they land
Russians,
on...
yes, because their technology, they were helped by the Russians initially, so their vehicles look very similar to the Russian vehicles, but that's not to say they're not now Chinese design. They are. They borrowed sort of the conceptual designs and then gone down their own road for their own designs. And again, because they've got a large landmass, it's better to drop it in. It usually drops into Mongolia.
Wow, so it's sort of a sovereignty issue there.
Yeah.
It's interesting how China have sort of succeeded the position of the old USSR and then the Russian Federation in terms of America's big challenger in space, but America maintains its position there as sort of the foremost space power.
It is, but where you've got a centralised government where you can actually direct people to do things, that's how it happens. I mean, the only reason the Americans got to the moon in the first place was Kennedy directed them to do that job.
Yeah, and it became a national mission. Let's now bring in the space engineer, Mattia Barbosa. Mattia, thanks indeed for joining us. This has been the most remarkable feat of engineering. What's your assessment of how this mission has gone now that is almost complete?
It's clear that this mission has proven a lot of different subsystems that are crucial for the next plan that NASA is proposing. With Jarek Isaacman becoming the new administrator of NASA, a lot of things have changed compared to the past. Namely, we have seen the new program Ignition, which is now shifting the focus of NASA to go back to the moon, this time to stay, rather than previous ideas of expanding toward Mars. And stay on the moon will take a great deal of challenges. Namely, the moon, it's probably the best playground to test all of our equipment needed to expand further out into the solar system. And this mission has proven that we are capable to get back to deep space, which is not granted. The capsule made the 4 astronauts the fastest men ever alive. So they've been traveling at 38,000 kilometers per hour, which is a phenomenal speed. And all of the subsystems that were tested during the mission are crucial to think about stepping back on the surface of the moon. They had some problems just recently, just a couple of days back. They struggled a little bit with some leaks in the oxidizer tank of the service module. They had some minor issue with communication, but overall the mission, it's pretty much a success. Now, what's coming forward? It's Artemis 3, which is going to test for the first time the lunar lander from Blue Origin or SpaceX, or both potentially in low Earth orbit. And as far as understood, they recently delivered the lunar lander from Blue Origin, which is Blue Moon, to the Johnson Space Center in the clear room to start testing. And this mission is going to be, let's say, less complicated on some aspects compared to Artemis 2, but it's going to pave the way for Artemis 4, which is expected in a couple of years now, hopefully. And we will see whether or not the US will manage to beat the Chinese in going back to the moon this time.
It really is a race, and that race is on now. I should say that we're looking at on our screens a vessel of some description sort of circling around. We may well be about to see someone sort of jump out of that boat and see if they can open the capsule, but we'll keep a close eye on that. Mattia, you mentioned Jared Isaacman, the new administrator of NASA, someone who's sort of changed up and shaken up a lot of the way that NASA works, and particularly when it comes to Artemis 3 and Artemis 4, the two successor missions to this one. I mean, within the last couple of weeks, he has completely changed what those missions should be.
Most definitely. Actually, Jarek Isaacman is probably the best thing that happened to NASA in the recent years. There has been a lot of confusion in the past about what NASA should actually do and how much space should be left to private companies into the new space era. But apparently now the picture is clear. Low Earth orbit is going to be dominated by private companies with their own space station that NASA is helping to establish, while the moon is going to be probably the best playground for us to learn how to expand into the solar system. Right now, NASA, through the Ignition program and the recent announcements on a lunar base, is expected to have a phase A, which is just started, that will see probably most commercial payload mission on the surface of the moon to establish essential services like a navigation system, a communication relay network, and start to do some science. And then we will see the exciting part, which will be phase B, when we will see lunar landers landing probably on the south pole of the moon near the Shackleton crater, where they can benefit of having much better sun exposure for longer periods of times, and probably access to water ice, which is great to make fuel, to make oxygen, to basically to stay alive. And the phase B will be the first demonstrating basic living principles for short durations. Hopefully we will get all the way to phase C, probably by late 2030s, where we will also have a more permanent infrastructure on the moon, much like the ISS has been for low Earth orbit. And from that point on, we will be able to master our knowledge about space. We will also test the fundamental technologies to dive deeper into space, like nuclear reactors and lunar drones, which are kind of particular.
Fascinating. Mattia, please do just stay on the line for us a second. I wonder if we can take the pictures full screen now that we have a number of vessels from NASA circling the Orion capsule. It looks like we've got quite a lot of activity here. Live pictures again off the coast of San Diego, where 4 perhaps naval vessels and a helicopter are now circling the capsule. Andy, before when Apollo splashed down, there would be a diver or a couple of divers who sort of speed out and then open the door to the capsule. Is that going to happen this time?
Not immediately, no. They have to make the vehicle safe. The reaction control system has to be saved, purging of any thruster fuel which is still there. So there's a waiting period for the spacecraft to be made safe, which we've got to do. There's also a debris fallout protocol, because some debris could be falling from the sky at this point from the deployment of the chute, because you've got a cover which is on the top of the vehicle, which is blasted away, and that has to clear so the parachutes can come out. That's got to dropped in the ocean somewhere, but they've got to make sure the area is safe and secure before the crews can go in.
That is very, very good to know. So these ships will be sort of staying around at a distance for a little bit of time, perhaps.
Yeah.
Let's bring Mattia Barbosa back in there. Sorry, Mattia, about that. Very interesting to see what's just going on our screen. The moon base, however, is absolutely fascinating. You were saying that phase 1 of this moon base construction has basically already begun.
Exactly. Basically, phase 1 will be probably what we are about to see in the coming month, because we will testify for the first time a proper return to the moon with more than just a lander that can bring only 3 people on the surface. This time we have to establish a proper infrastructure on the moon to make people stay. In low Earth orbit, we have plenty of infrastructure like the TDRS system, that is a communication system that has been used in this very mission to communicate with the astronauts during re-entry. But on the moon, we don't have the same kind of relay, and that's also the reason why we had the 40 minutes blackout during the flyby. Of course, if we need to stay longer on the moon and create a proper base, we need to establish infrastructures. And that's going to be something left to the private companies to put together. Then we will see the man landing on the moon for the first time with Artemis 4. And from there on, as NASA states, from Artemis 5 on, we will start the establishment of a proper lunar base, which is going to be exciting.
To be clear, Artemis 4 will be the next time humans land on the moon. But before Artemis 4 actually lands on the moon with humans, we're going to see a lot of sort of robots land on the moon. We're going to see a lot of private sort of landing attempts as well.
Definitely. Indeed, we will see lunar landers bringing back on the moon lunar rovers like the Viper mission, which was almost cancelled just a few months ago, and that expectedly will provide us extremely helpful insights to understand whether or not and how much water ice there is on the surface, so that we can already forecast what's needed to establish a proper permanent base on the moon. Because let's remember that we are going to the moon, but we need lunar lunar resources in order to establish a proper moon base. And matter of fact, we need local resources in order to expand through the solar system. So that's the perfect perfect place where to test this kind of stuff. And also we will see lunar drones with the Moonfall mission that are going to jump around on the lunar surface to get to more complicated places to reach, and communication systems. And then hopefully we will see parts of the lunar gateway or station that was expected to be placed around the moon, but repurposed in order to perform like lunar modules for a lunar base.
Well, that is absolutely fascinating, that perhaps this will be one way in which the future moon missions are actually much more advanced than the Apollo-era missions, where it was just the lonely lander by itself. I mean, it could be that the time that Artemis 4 astronauts touch down on the surface of the moon, they're going to be surrounded by quite a bit of equipment, perhaps, and not just sort of for scientific advancement, but also for safety.
That's true. Let's not forget that space already right now is the backbone of our civilization. The timing and the position provided by navigation satellites, as well as communication from satellites, is already so significant for our civilization that the whole civilization will collapse without it. The moon will be the perfect platform to test new things, like the extraction of resources from planetary bodies, which is the key to access the new level of resources that an expanding civilization like ours need, and most importantly, preserve Earth from extracting resources that can damage the ecosystem, because do not forget that Earth is the only planet we know that hosts an ecosystem, that hosts a biosphere, and we should really preserve for that. Space, however, can become our playground.
I'm just going to break into you now because the administrator of NASA, Jared Isaacman, is speaking on the NASA feed. Let's just have a little listen to what he's saying.
Bring them back safely and to set up for a series more. I mean, this is not a once in a lifetime, which you hear sometimes around here. It's like, this was a once in a lifetime. No, it's not. This is just the beginning. We are going to get back into doing this with frequency, sending missions to the moon until we land on it in 2028 and start building our base.
Yeah, are we going to build on the momentum for Artemis 3? I mean, it's just around the corner.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's, you know, part of me too. Like, I can't wait to get the crew off of Integrity right now, but also getting Integrity back on this ship so we can start taking a look at it, because all that data is so precious to us right now. I mean, we are going to definitely want to take a good look at the thermal protection system. We're going to want to download all the data they couldn't transmit back to us and use that to inform Artemis 3. But we're already making progress, right? You had SRB segments already showing up at KSC. Core stage for Artemis 3 is rolling out on April 20th. We're getting Mobile Launcher 1 back in vehicle assembly building. So yes, there is a lot to celebrate right now on a mission well accomplished for Artemis 2, and at the same time, we got to start getting ready for 3.
Amazing. And last question, you know, for people who joined us for all 10 days to see what we can accomplish together with our international partners, what do you think about the fact that we're going to keep doing this more and more and more?
It's incredibly exciting. I mean, yes, it's the contributions, like the best and brightest across the NASA workforce from across the country, our industry partners, our international partners. We had a Canadian Space Agency astronaut on board in Jeremy. We had the European Service Module. And you think in the days leading up to this launch, I mean, 48 hours prior to launching Artemis 2, I was meeting with the Italian Space Agency. We signed a memorandum of understanding to build a habitation module on the moon. I mean, you have countries, all of our allies and partners coming together saying, we are committed to this effort. We are returning to the moon. We're doing it to stay. We are building that enduring presence. We are going to master the skills on the surface of the moon so someday we can undertake missions to Mars. It's just an incredibly exciting time, and we're not going at it alone. We're bringing everybody along with us.
Absolutely. And speaking of everyone, one more time, we're going to ask the crew here, you guys ready to land on the moon? Awesome. I love that. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Listening to Jared Isaacman, the new administrator of NASA. He's only been in the job for a very short time, really, but my goodness me, he seems to have got the organisation fired up and ready to return to the moon, as Mattia Barbosa was just describing. That moon base now very much the mission for NASA. Mattia, thank you indeed for joining us, and thank you for your expertise. Really, really appreciate it. I'm going to return now to my panel here in London, joined by Andy Lound, the space expert, Maggie Liu, the astrophysicist, Christo Fufas, the journalist and broadcaster, and Jane Stevenson, the former Conservative MP. Christo, we are now looking at this Orion capsule with 3 bulbous balloons on the top of it, making sure it doesn't tip over. It's a sense of sort of anticipation.
Yeah, we're just waiting, aren't we, to see the rescue that is going to be taking place. Rescue retrieval, I suppose, is a better way of putting it. It's absolutely staggering what we've witnessed. And actually, the words, I've written them down, the words of the NASA controller, from the pages of Jules Verne to modern-day mission to the moon. I mean, what a way of putting it. I think those are words that will be historic, because it's just absolutely amazing. And also, right, yeah, 2's done, we're on to 3. I mean, literally, like, they've not even got them out the pod yet. And they're on to 3. They're talking about 3.
It's interesting, Jane, in an age of such divided politics, where, of course, a President of the United States who not everyone loves, and a lot of partisan bickering, there is in Jared Isaacman, the administrator of NASA, just a huge amount of respect, both the people that work for NASA, politicians on left and right across the aisle. There's respect for the mission that is now underway.
Absolutely, and I think it does. It takes us out of everyday life. It takes us out of everyday politics. This is something we all want to grab on the coattails of and celebrate. Such a fantastic achievement for the United States and Canada, but for humanity. This is an extraordinary moment, and I think it's whet our appetites now to see boots on the ground on the moon. You know, this is the next, I think, benchmark that people, you know...
Don't say boots on the ground. That is so the wrong phrasing.
It's very bad, but they will be wearing boots. They will be on the ground of the moon. Space boots. But, you know, to think of this after so many years, I cannot believe it's been half a century. And you know, you think of everything else we've achieved, but we do seem to have let that lull go for way too long. So I think, yeah, roll on Artemis 3. I think we're all excited.
That's reminded me of your point. Remember, you said that earlier you had a theory as to why it is we've got so technologically advanced. You keep teasing me with this point.
Christo, I will get to that point, but I've got some breaking news to bring you now. GBNews can report that we understand President Trump has been watching the splashdown of Artemis 2. A television was wheeled into the room for the president and his guests at Trump Winery. So we know the president himself doesn't drink, but I'm sure that his guests at the winery might be fairly jolly with how successful this has all gone. Let's bring in Greg Swenson in Washington, D.C. For us now. President Trump clearly cares about the Artemis program. For him, it's a part of his legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this was really important to the president, as I mentioned earlier, you know, coinciding with the 250 celebration. I'm just annoyed that I wasn't invited to that party, but I think it will be a good time. I think there'll be some good cheer there for sure.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know...
Sorry, do go on.
The president will be watching because he's so patriotic, and he's really enthused about this program, just like the way he supports the troops, that great rescue last Friday and Sunday. I mean, we woke up on Easter morning to that great news, and the fact that we have astronauts in space for the first time in 50 years. So it's really a great moment. I think, you know, it's quite natural for the president to be enthused. Doesn't surprise me that he interrupted the dinner or whatever he's doing tonight to wheel in the TVs for this. It's a great moment for the country, for everybody, not just, you know, both sides of the aisle, to say the least.
And of course, this programme predates the current administrator of NASA. Jared Isaacman has shaped up what the future missions will be like, but Artemis 2 was always going to look like this, whoever was the administrator of NASA. But I've got to ask you, Greg, there was a bit of a hot and cold being blown by the president. He first nominated Jared Isaacman and then withdrew his nomination. And for 9 months, NASA was fairly administrator-less. only for the president then to re-nominate Jared Isaacman. Was that a political mistake? Why did the president change his mind, pick him and then not pick him and then pick him again?
Yeah, I mean, the president has a lot on his plate, and I think that what happens is, you have things that are really important, and I can mention the Chagos Islands, for example. It wasn't on the radar for the president. It might have been on the radar for other cabinet members or other parts of the administration, but I think you could say the same for space. This was a personnel move. I'm really impressed by Jared. I mean, he's bringing a real positive private sector vibe to and really uniting the country in many respects. So I think he's fantastic, and I think the president, if he could do it all over again, perhaps he would have made the move sooner and gotten him cleared. But those things happen in politics, and there's so many starts and stops with confirmations. There are still confirmations that haven't happened, and we're a year and a quarter into the administration.
Because there is some speculation that the reason why the nomination was withdrawn had something to do with the bust-up that President Trump had with his one-time advisor, Elon Musk. Yeah. It was around the same time that Musk was kicked out as being an advisor to the president. And of course, Jared Isaacman had flown on SpaceX ships beforehand with 2 private missions. He did know Elon Musk. Could it have been some of that personality politics?
I would imagine. That's a great point, Tom. And look, the president, he's very loyal at times, but he also, gets into spats. That was a very public spat between Elon Musk and the president. I'm really glad they kissed and made up, that's for sure. And good for Jared for hanging in there.
Yeah, no, it does seem like he's someone who has brought together. It's when you think about those who work for NASA, you don't necessarily think of a constituency of people who would be most willing to sort of be at the front of the MAGA movement, the sort of scientists and I don't know, ecologists or whoever happens to work in sort of interplanetary science, and yet these people seem to be fairly behind a Trump pick for administrator. That's a fair achievement. Yeah.
Yes, definitely, and because they're all patriots. Even if whether they're Republicans or Democrats, they're patriots. They're mission focused, and this is it brings me back to the '60s. My father was an engineer at NASA in the early Apollo missions, and was at Cape Canaveral in the early '60s. And so this. If you look back at popular culture, the movie The Right Stuff came out in 1983, a really unifying movie for the country. I would have not have guessed it was 1983. I thought it was 10 years later, but it really inspired people because it was about those great men of the 1950s and 1960s with the pocket protectors and the short sleeve white shirts, and those were the cool guys of the 50s and 60s. They weren't bond traders. So, in the 80s, we thought the bond traders were masters of the universe, but in the 50s and 60s, it was these engineers, these guys in the white short sleeve shirts, and we saw that again with Apollo 13, which came out in 1995, but is still a really overwatched movie in America and around the world. So there's some popular culture here. There's some competition. We mentioned earlier, the competition with Russia was real. That's why JFK came out so powerfully, because he was in one sense beaten by the Russians, or the Americans were beaten by the Russians initially in the space effort. So, and then now you have the Chinese. So I think America's going to win here, and it was great to hear Jared talk about collaboration with Canada, collaboration with Italy. There's a robust space program in the UK that I know very well because my daughter went to high school in the UK and was very involved in the space program. So I know there's a lot of collaboration in Western Europe and in North America right now. It's great to see.
Absolutely, and I believe Japan is designing a moon rover for the Artemis program, so it'll be amazing to see if that makes it onto a future Artemis mission. You mentioned a bunch of dates there, the 1960s, the 1983 with that movie, and moments when the United States comes together. I was reminded of, I think, an anecdote from 1981 of Ronald Reagan when he was shot. I think that was in 1981. I might be misremembering. When he was rushed to the hospital in Washington, D.C., taken into the operating room, turns to his doctor and said, "My goodness me, I hope you're a Republican." And the surgeon turns to him and says, Mr. President, he was of course a registered Democrat, Mr. President, today we're all Republicans. It does feel like there are those sort of moments of national unity. I don't know why that sort of sprung to mind. And yet
no, it's a great moment.
And yet you mentioned this sort of role model sort of setting that we're now seeing for a new generation, when there are lots of sort of questionable role models, particularly in the streaming world, in the looks-maxing world, in everything else. It's fantastic to see role models of exploration, of science, of spacefaring and everything else. I'm just being told we should listen in now to this rescue as we see, I believe, a man swimming out towards the capsule there.
Yep.
And of course, as we choose to listen in, nothing is being said. No, here we go.
The vehicle to make a hazard assessment.
Assessment being conducted. A number of naval assets there out in the Pacific, and one getting very close indeed, circling the capsule. It has been quite some time that these astronauts have been sitting in their Orion spacecraft, experiencing gravity and waiting for the capsule to be inspected and then opened, twiddling their thumbs, no doubt.
No, not quite twiddling their thumbs, making sure that they've switched everything off inside, making the system safe. They'll be being given instructions by the people outside, because they're checking the outside of the vehicle, make sure there's no leaks of any kind, which could be hazardous. Hydrazine is a real big problem if you have a leaky problem there. So they're just checking it. It's, again, a step-by-step approach. All this is textbook. They're working to the plan. The extraction should begin about 02:06 our time, so everything's working perfectly normally here.
So we still do have a good sort of 15 to 20 minutes before that extraction, despite the fact that they're being circled here by one of those boats. And I'm remembering back to footage I've seen of the Apollo missions. I can't remember this many boats in the water.
No, Apollo was a little bit more. It was a bit more rough and ready. There were, to use a very old phrase, there were real men in the 1960s. Okay, it is quite interesting because yes, it was a very different. The extraction was much more quickly done in those days. The vehicle wasn't as complicated in some respects as these, although in other respects they were more complicated because they were analog, so there's a lot more cabling and all sorts going on. But generally speaking, emissions were quite lower down in those particular cases, and the Orion extraction system well on the Apollo vehicle.
And Maggie, just remind us, what are these big bulbous protuberances, these orange sort of circles at the top of the craft?
They were what Andy said earlier. They're ejected out, would put them in the right position if they were kind of upside down. So just to keep them afloat, essentially.
It's a safety sort of uprighting mechanism. I mean, you'd hope that they put the heavy bits at the bottom and the light bits at the top, but perhaps that isn't enough. What if the water was rough? Actually, what if the water was rough? They can't control the weather. What
no, they
can't.
In the case of Apollo 8, they landed down in 10-foot waves, which was quite risky, and they all got seasick, and which was a real problem.
Wow, 10-foot waves.
And so it was interesting because when they recovered the vehicle, it was actually vomit everywhere.
The initiation of the recovery of the Artemis crew aboard Integrity. All of the Navy divers and the fast boats are now approaching the spacecraft after conducting a hazard assessment. The vehicle has been powered down. Entry Flight Director Rick Henfling now waiting for the life raft, the front porch, to be erected along the side of the vehicle so that the hatch can be opened and the crew members extracted from Integrity, soon to be hoisted one by one into a pair of Navy helicopters for a short flight back to the deck of the USS John P. Murtha.
This is exactly
if you missed it earlier, we talked to Flight Dynamics and received a more official touchdown time or splashdown time, as it were, of 7:07 and 27 seconds p.m. Central Time, 5:07 and 27 seconds p.m. Pacific Time. That would equate to a mission elapsed time of 9 days, 1 hour, 32 minutes, and 15 seconds.
Now, as we've been listening in there to mission control from NASA, what will happen is a inflatable rim will be placed around the base of the capsule, and they have to do that, Andy, before they open the door.
Yes, that's right, because you don't want anyone falling into the ocean. So you put the rim round. So as they call it, the hazard assessment has gone very well indeed. So it shows you just how reliable and good this aircraft is, and how the hazardous materials have been injected quite effectively. And that's a really good sign on this first mission from a test mission like that.
And again, that's what we saw with that infrared camera as it was coming down. Some of that hazardous.
On the top of the vehicle, you actually have these little areas here. One of the problems you could have with the vehicle falling from the sky is it could start rotating and spinning. You have to counteract that. So they actually stabilise the vehicle as she's coming down. And that's what we saw with these. Because we saw it clearly. You don't see it in white light. That's only the heat you're actually seeing coming out, because it's invisible to white light.
Which is why it's so fascinating to see all of these different angles. I mean, NASA have excelled themselves in documenting this process. I mean, as we can see, helicopter shots, infrared shots, telescopic shots. I mean, we are getting the works.
Yes, I mean, it's very important that everything is documented correctly, because everything then goes to the engineers to look at it, to examine everything very carefully.
And Maggie, that reminds us that this is, after all, a test mission. The purpose of this mission, it's lovely to have the wonderful photographs, it's amazing to have the live television drama, but ultimately they've got to test this stuff.
Yeah, and we heard Jared Isaacman say, like, the most important thing is, like, getting the data back and then analysing all of that data. That's what they're going to be working on. To be able to do Artemis 3 and 4.
So while we're celebrating here, while we whooped and cheered as we saw the splashdown, actually for many people at NASA, the work just begins.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, I mean, looking at the sort of flotilla that we see there, I'm not going to call it an armada, because I don't think you can have an armada with half a dozen ships, but it does seem like it's quite a big operation there setting up, and it does seem like there's perhaps a little bit more health and safety than there was in the late 1960s and early 1970s.
It gets everywhere, doesn't it, that health and safety? Honestly, the Daily Mail will be leading on this. Health and safety gone.
How dare they not get those astronauts out 10 minutes earlier?
Yeah. Can I ask our science experts on the panel, what are the astronauts now? What are the conditions in the pod now? Is it still going to be very hot in there? We're sitting in a lovely aircon studio.
Yeah, it gets very hot inside there, so they really need, because they've got the vents working by now, hopefully, to get fresh air. They need fresh air to be pushed into there. But yes, it usually gets very hot for them to sort themselves out, ready for extraction from the vehicle.
So the sooner
in
the
Apollo,
better.
it was a nightmare, apparently. They were doing overheated, and that's why in some cases, they volunteered, they prefer to wear just flight suits coming back. But you can't on this test mission. You've got to try those space suits out. That's critical.
And how do they actually, is it doors to manual for someone inside? Is it like...
Yes, it's doors to manual, absolutely right, yes. They can open the door easily from the inside. This was a lesson from Apollo 1 when we had the fire. So they can open it from the inside, and it can be opened from the outside.
Let's now just listen in to Mission Control.
Of integrity.
Now, Mission
this
Control
includes
has been
Navy divers and Navy flight surgeon and other recovery personnel who have trained for several years for this recovery process.
They added the crew is in excellent shape, that there were no hazardous gases, and that the spacecraft performed perfectly all the way down.
Good.
We can now see the recovery crew aboard a rigid inflatable boat there, just making contact with the craft, where they will erect this, I'm assuming it will be bright orange, inflatable rim around the edge of this spacecraft, a step that they have to do.
Some 41 minutes following splashdown, the vehicle has been powered down. There's no hazardous gas emanating from the vehicle. That's why the first team of recovery personnel has been able to pull alongside Integrity. And the reports continue to come in that the 4 astronauts are in excellent shape.
Well, there we can hear the confirmation that the crew is in excellent shape, all 4 astronauts there, and the crucial explanation there that perhaps explains why there was such a wide berth from all of those ships for the first 40 minutes, or boats perhaps, for the first 40 minutes of this exercise, that the hazardous gases need to be absolutely sure to have been expunged from the capsule before they approach it.
Just on that, what is hydrazine? Because that was the thing you were talking about. What is it? Why would it? Why is it on the ship?
Yes, it's a chemical that's used for manoeuvring thrusters. It's been used in all space missions. It's a good material to actually use for the thrusters. It's not a very explosive material that you usually see, so it pushes out a heavy vapour, and that's allowed you to manoeuvre the spacecraft.
And these are short bursts of white gas that you can often see when a spacecraft is sort of manoeuvring itself in space.
Right. So was that being released to manoeuvre it, or were they releasing it to get rid of it?
It's a mixture of as it goes down, as it's falling down, they're using it to stop it spinning, and then they'll actually, anything left in, they'll just release into the atmosphere.
But presumably they have to wait to release the final bit when they're not needing to be on course for anything. Otherwise they put themselves on course.
That's right. So you could dump it, so you don't need it anymore.
I'm a hydrazine expert by the end of this, aren't we? We all know our hydrazine.
We know our hydrazine from our hydrogen, from our... No, I'll stop there. Absolutely. Well, we are seeing, again, from that aerial perspective, that just the number of naval vessels around the capsule, and indeed, in the very bottom right, we can see the one that has made contact, carrying a huge number of divers and personnel. Whereas with the Apollo missions, it was only 2 divers who swam out.
And they'll get a better welcome here because Apollo 11, when they came back, because, of course, it was the first time humans had touched moon rocks, weren't sure whether or not it'd be contaminated. And when they opened the door, they simply threw some biological suits at them and then slammed the door again.
Time from now. In the meantime,
that was a nice welcome.
A bit like flying a budget airline.
Where my colleague Megan Cruz is standing by to provide her situation report. Megan, can you hear us?
To NASA's coverage,
hey, Rob,
we're going to hear from
a
reporter
we're back here on the bow of the recovery ship, where there are still plenty of people peering out into the water. We are not very far from the action everyone is seeing on their screen now. The Orion spacecraft, Integrity, in the ocean, surrounded by a number of recovery boats. As Rob has been saying, in those recovery boats, NASA and Navy personnel specifically trained to get the astronauts out of Orion. In some of our wide shots, you can probably see that there are 6 boats out in the water. More than 40 people out in the water right now on those boats.
From NASA there that there are more than 40 people in the boats surrounding the spacecraft there in the water, that we are waiting for a large inflatable raft to be produced, and I believe a rim around the craft as well. Andy, let's go through some of the terminology here. Yeah. We've heard Orion, we've heard Integrity, we've heard Artemis, we've heard SLS. Let's break down what on earth are all of these things? And of course the service module and the command module.
SLS is the launch system, space launch system.
That's the rocket.
That's the rocket. That's the 2 solid boosters strapped to a very large oxygen and hydrogen tank with thrusters at the bottom. That's the SLS. Orion is the class design of the spacecraft. It's been made, and the whole spacecraft is simply called Orion.
So Orion is both this sort of gumdrop bit that's now in the water,
that's right, and the
service module that we saw jettisoned about an hour and a half ago.
It's the Orion spacecraft. Integrity is what the astronauts have named their spacecraft for this mission. And every spacecraft has its name for the mission, and they've named this one Integrity. So you had that with Apollo as well. You had, strangely, one of the Apollo missions was actually called Orion, interesting enough. You had Eagle for the lunar module.
Eagle has landed.
You got it. So they gave it the name, so it had the name Integrity. And Artemis is the name of the project. And therefore, each mission will have a project name plus its number of the mission. Artemis 1, which was the test flight, Artemis 2, a crewed test flight, Artemis 3 will be the docking system, Artemis 4 will be the landing mission.
So given that the entire spacecraft that we did call Orion when it was connected to one another has sort of separated, and this is only half of Orion, we really shouldn't call this Orion?
Yes, it's the Orion capsule.
Oh, it is still the Orion capsule,
still the Orion
but
capsule.
it's also Integrity.
But it's named Integrity.
And is that like a nickname?
Just for this mission.
Right.
So the next one won't be called
So when I'm
Integrity.
referring to this sort of strange gumdrop with balloons on top of it, floating about in the Pacific there, I should say that the door has been opened to the capsule, which we are calling both Orion and Integrity.
Where's the donut inflatable thing?
We can see there the door seems to be sort of shining, shimmering there in the Pacific sunshine as we approached 6 p.m. local time, approaching 2 a.m. London time.
Yeah, been in there a long time, haven't
But
they?
no skirt. I'm waiting for the inflatable.
I think we're starting to see the beginning of an inflatable yellow rather than orange. That's a surprise. Sort of piece of material there. Is that being unfolded? It's quite hard to see, but we are getting swooping helicopter pictures here of this intricately managed process. Let's listen into the NASA coverage.
The goal is to have a recovery personnel with each astronaut assessing them. Boat's getting closer now. Again, that one that's right up against Orion, those are the divers that will go in to the spacecraft to check on each of the astronauts. These other boats will begin doing a number of things, putting on that stabilization collar onto Orion, building that front porch. Eventually, they will retrieve the parachutes, as well as tow Orion back to the well deck of the recovery ship here.
Now, while this might seem slow and laborious, it's worth putting in context. This little spacecraft has travelled 250,000 miles and back. It's travelled at speeds surpassing 25,000 miles per hour. I suppose the astronauts will be fairly happy to wait just a few more minutes to be safely recovered.
I found it interesting someone's going on board to check on them while they're still in there.
It's a modern process. That didn't happen in Apollo. They sort of poked their head through the door and asked the question and then start to retrieve it. Now they go in and do a full check now.
Part of that is this is significantly larger than the Apollo capsules. Much wider and a little bit taller.
Yes, it is, and therefore there's a lot more space in it. Hence you've got 4 astronauts on board the spacecraft. And considering modern equipment as well uses less cabling and is more electronic, so it's a lot more neater in the spacecraft as well, more storage space.
So how many can they fit on board there? Can all 4 of the people checking the other 4 go on? So there's 8 in total, or do they have to be checked?
They would
one
probably
at a time?
put one in at a time to check each one. but you would get two. You could easily get two in there to have a quick look at them, but you don't want to overcrowd each other. Not in any rush. As long as they're all fit and healthy and they seem to be okay, then it'll move quickly.
And for those of us that's watched the Apollo splashdowns and retrievals, I mean, this is just an enormous number of people in the water around them. 40 as opposed to, I think it was only 2 when it came to Apollo.
That's right, very different. A Seeking helicopter flew overhead. There was a rubber boat went out with 2 Navy SEALs in there, opened the door, chucked biological suits in, slammed the door, waited for them to come out, and then brought them out again. And then a little cage was sent down, and they had to sit in this little cage as they were brought up.
Attached to the helicopter.
Yeah, and then they were taken back that way. So it was quite an interesting exercise.
And you touched on it, but let's just re-emphasise the quarantine that these Apollo astronauts had to stay in because they thought, well, my goodness me, we've never been to the moon before. What if they've picked up some sort of disease that could infect the world? What if we accidentally wipe out humanity? That would be a big whoops. We just didn't know.
No, we didn't know, and it was a safety precaution. And there was one ground crew person who was a doctor who went in with the astronauts in the same quarantine because, of course, he could have been infected if there was anything wrong. It turned out there wasn't a problem, but he didn't know what was the problem with the soil. And Buzz Aldrin always said it was quite useful. He says, because for several weeks after, every time I went into a shower, at the bottom there was grey dust which had got straight into the pores of his skin. So had there been anything bad in there, he said we would have been affected. As it turned out, it wasn't. It was quite inert to be taken into the skin, but there are other issues with it. Taking it into the lungs is not good because it's very spiky, it's very glassy, so it can cause lung infections.
Maggie, do we know why the moon is so dusty as opposed to just being sort of solid rock?
I'm not sure, to be honest, but as Andy said, it is a very sharp dust, so we know it's sharp dust, and the reason that being is that unlike here on Earth where we've got like wind and other things wearing things down to make it smooth, moon, everything's just there. It's not being eroded down, it's not smoothed down, so that's one of the problems.
It's remarkable to think about the objects that were left on the moon by the Apollo missions. I mean, I think one of the final astronauts left a little photograph of his family placed down in the dust, and 53 years later, I mean, that photograph will still be there in the exact same position he left it because there's no wind to blow it around.
It might still be there, but there is huge amounts of radiation on there, so likely it won't be a nice picture.
It will be probably a white piece of card. The family long since gone. Although I believe he wrote a message on the other side, which will surely be preserved.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope so. But my goodness me, unfiltered solar radiation, not good for photographs. Interestingly, would that also mean that the flag planted, all six flags planted by the Apollo astronauts 11, 12, not 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, those flags would also all be bleached.
They were coated with the UV protection, but it's hard to say. And one of the good, it'd be nice to go back and actually physically have a look. And to be honest, one of the good reasons to go back to each of the landing sites would be to see what's happened to all the materials that have been left there. From a scientist's point of view, it'd be brilliant because you'll be able to pull those back. This has been on the surface of the moon for 50 years. Let's see what radiation has done to it. And that would actually be a good thing to do for helping the moon base.
And yet the landing of Artemis 4 is going to be on the south pole of the moon. That's not particularly near where Apollo 11, etc. landed.
Absolutely. So going to the far side of the moon to areas where we know likely has frozen water is the reason that we want to go that side. It's not going to be anything like the terrain that they've experienced, and we've seen that with the images that we've seen from the near and far side of the moon. The terrain on the other side is completely different, so it's a new kind of world for astronauts to explore.
If there is then water or frozen water, then is there any likelihood of any kind of life that might be found on that side of the moon?
It's unclear that there would be life, especially life like what we're used to here on Earth. But there are lava tubes in the lunar surface. So these are kind of tunnels that are protected from the UV radiation and the harsh environment on the moon. And potentially, these are the kind of areas that you might at least find historical life.
And these are lava tubes because the moon used to have a lot of active volcanoes, although it's long since died.
Yeah, well, we believe there used to be volcanic activity, and there are probably still ancient volcanoes under there.
Not active, though. Not active. Oh, shame. Moon volcanoes sound so sci-fi. Let's return now to Washington, D.C., where Greg Swenson has been for us this whole time. Greg, I mean, this seems like quite an overmanned operation.
Yeah, I guess I'd start with those the four Navy dive recovery team people. They are not just, you know, Navy SEAL type recovery experts. They're also kind of dive medicine. You know, one of whom is an emergency doctor, so he'll be on site. But all the other three are also trained in different types of medicine and recovery. So, you know, it's a really skilled set. I don't know about the other 36 people. It might be, you know, setting up the, you know, inflatable collar that they're putting around. Maybe it's just a lot of safety. So, I mean, better safe than sorry. I would argue. But the lead team is this four Navy dive recovery team, and they are skilled in medicine as well.
And that is a really, really important element of all of this, that the crew are safe, secure, well, but all the indications that we've got so far are that we've had good responses, excellent shape are the words from NASA.
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, it sounds great. You just can't expect that or count on it all the time. You have to prepare for contingencies. You have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So I think we've seen that recently in some of our military operations. So yeah, these people are in great shape. As we were discussing earlier, you know, Christina Cook has been in space for really long periods of time.
Greg, I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. We're going to listen to NASA talking about this inflatable orange ring that will be placed around the capsule.
And get this orange line on top tied in the same fashion, and then this will be secured to the capsule, and the astronauts can safely take their first steps out of the capsule onto the front porch.
Okay, and how long will it take them to set up the stabilization collar?
You should definitely be able to handle this in under 10 minutes.
Okay, wow. And then you just mentioned the front porch. So basically, after they set up the stabilization collar, then they set up what's called the front porch here.
That's correct.
Okay, and what's the front porch?
Front porch is basically a bigger waiting room for the astronauts to sit in while we wait for the helicopters to show up and grab them.
Okay, so the medical team that was inside with the crew, they're going to help them out and onto the front porch?
That is correct.
And then what happens here?
We have hired trained medical personnel also on board the front porch that will give them lookovers and just make sure they're okay while we wait for the helicopters to show up.
Okay. How does it feel, I mean, your team, you, to be part of a mission that's returning astronauts from the moon in more than 50 years?
We all feel extremely honored to be a part of this, as well as a bigger mission for the Navy and joining up with NASA to do great things.
And do you feel like you and your team are ready?
Yes, very ready.
Cool. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, there we were seeing NASA explain the inflatable ring that is still yet to be placed around the Orion capsule, also known as Integrity, and then a front porch, which is an innovation in recovery. An enormous floating platform where the astronauts will be able to step out onto and frankly stretch around a little bit more than they have been able to inside this capsule where they have been stuck for the last 10 days. Let's return now to Greg Swenson with us in Washington, D.C. Greg, it speaks to the sort of integration across different branches of the United States government. And when I say branches, I really just mean sort of Navy, NASA, different organisations, different. What was the word I'm grasping for? Well, we're seeing that sort of integration anyway.
Sure. Yeah, look, traditionally, you know, going back generations, you always thought of NASA and astronauts as Air Force people. They were flying the fastest planes. I'm thinking about John Glenn, who also became a senator. And those were typically Air Force people, but it's kind of morphed into a multi-service discipline now. You've had Victor Glover flew with both the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marines. The commander, Reed Wiseman, he was a Navy F-18 fighter pilot, but he also flew F-35. So, you have a lot of different disciplines here. It's great to see the Navy in sort of the recovery of the astronauts. And it's amazing to think that 50 years ago, they would just lower the basket right to the capsule and the astronaut would climb out and climb into the basket. That seems a little bit dangerous and unnecessary. So look, they're going to take all the precautions they can. Glad to see the crew out there making sure everyone's safe.
Absolutely, and it does just look like the most impressive operation, clearly meticulously planned, although of course it has now been more than an hour since this capsule splashed down there into the Pacific Ocean. And yes, those checks have been done, but we are yet to see these inflatables pop out.
Yeah, I thought the collar would be put around the capsule much sooner, but I have to think these astronauts, I mean, again, they're very well trained and they know that they knew this was coming. There's procedures, they're probably going over the data, they're taking their suits off or whatever, but they must be really anxious to get out of that capsule after over 9 days in space. So, but they're so well trained, so they're going to be fine.
And fascinatingly, astronauts so often are selected not just for their expertise or abilities, but also for their temperament, for their ability to remain calm in situations of great danger or indeed other issues, their ability to sort of get along with one another. I mean, it's such an important aspect that perhaps isn't often thought about, but the temperament of these people is well up there when it comes to astronaut selection.
Without a doubt. I'm thinking about Jim Lovell and saying, Houston, we have a problem. The calmness is so critical. And I think, again, the two lead astronauts are pushing 50 or already have turned 50. So they've had a really long career and a lot of leadership abilities. And remember, they're really scientists at heart. These guys didn't go to the military academies. They went to Cal Poly, which is probably the most intense technical university in America. And I think Victor Glover went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, RPI we call it. These guys are scientists and great naval or Air Force aviators. They're great athletes. They're super cut for 50 or just super cut, period. So, I mean, it's really impressive to see these multi-disciplines. They're not just, great fighter pilots, but they're scientists and they have the temperament for space travel. It's amazing.
And that is a point that we touched on earlier too, the idea that actually, for the first time in perhaps some time, these are role models for young people in America and around the world, young people who spend their time sort of fixated on their TikTok apps, on their mobile phones, looking at influencers who are perhaps less than admirable. I mean, it does take big, grand, impressive projects like the Artemis program to perhaps provide an alternative.
Tom, I was 7 years old for Apollo 11. Every child in America wanted to be an astronaut. So it's led to a generation of aspiration. And even if you don't become an astronaut, the chances are pretty slim. The fighter pilots, the technicians, the engineers, it's really inspiring to a generation. We saw that even during the Space Shuttle Challenger, ups and downs that we had. And again, popular culture, the competition with Russia and China, or the Soviet Union, I should say. So, yeah, this is an inspiring moment. I hope there's a lot of young people watching all of this.
Well, absolutely. Let's hope that people are as inspired as one, I believe, 10 or 11-year-old boy who happened to be interviewed accidentally on CNN, a microphone shoved in his face. And I think, to what I'm referring, I'm going to censor the language here. He was asked, why are you so excited about this rocket launch? And he just said, because we're going to the freaking moon. Although I think he used rather more blue language than freaking. And anyway, this young boy was then invited, because the moment went completely viral all over social media. This young boy was then invited to the Kennedy Space Center by Jared Isaacman and given a personal tour. I mean, I can't imagine that happening under a different NASA administrator.
Yeah, nobody likes to see the coarse language being used by a little kid. I don't know. I was hoping that wouldn't be a moment, but it sure turned into one. So it was kind of cute. It was kind of funny, but I wish it was better language.
Yes, I wish you used the language that I used, and I think NASA has used in their communications, but at least there was some enthusiasm there. Greg Swenson, thanks indeed. We'll be back with you a little bit later. I'm being told that all 4 astronauts continue to be in excellent shape. Doing great is the latest quote that we have from NASA as they still bob around, and we can begin to see this inflatable rim there around the capsule, as yet not inflated.
Do you know what I think is brilliant to know is you've got the vast technology that has advanced decade after decade to get them around the far side of the moon. But then also you saw when they were giving the interview about the information about this inflatable ring, you know, sailing knots and inflatables and parachutes, the technology that hasn't changed in decades and decades. And I love the fact that they combine those technologies, because if it works really well, then there's no point in changing it. And I think sometimes in life there's an arrogance that, you know, oh, that's old, we can't use it, whereas they're using what's best, even if it's a bit crude.
Yes, as the old adage goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Although they have had to relearn a lot of this stuff, because sadly it's been so long that a lot of the people who originally created this sort of technology with the Apollo program have moved on, and in many cases left this Earth.
And do you know what? We've got this technology in the palm of our hand, Tom, and we've really, really advanced in our technology, yet when it comes to the moon and Concorde, we haven't. And I just wonder if you could share any kind of theory about that you might have.
I have a theory about this, which is not mine originally, but there is something called the Henry Adams curve,
right,
which has been observed about the energy use per person in the United States. It was growing on what looked like an exponential until the oil crisis in 1972, 1973. And what you can track along this sort of growth of energy use per person is you go from horse and carts to trains to motor cars to aeroplanes to spaceships to supersonic flights. Jet engine is somewhere in the middle there. And you get this growth of transportation technology until you get to the 1970s. And if we look around us all today, I mean, cars, okay, they look a little bit smoother, but they look basically the same as they did in the 1970s. Aeroplanes certainly look the same as they did in the 1970s. Our rockets look pretty much the same as they did in the 1970s. The theory goes that when energy consumption broke, and it's been about the same since the 1970s, our energy consumption per person, it stopped going on that exponential, where energy suddenly got expensive. The theory goes that when energy gets expensive, it becomes uneconomical to move atoms about, and instead we move bits about, electrons and photons, information. So all the energy that was going into that incredible 50 years of innovation in personal transportation and moving matter went to moving bits and bytes and information instead. And so ever since that point, since the mid-1970s, information technology has advanced in the same rapid pace that before then transportation technology had.
Do you think then if transportation ever became much more efficient when it came to energy, it would ever go back to people wanting to innovate around moving people faster or more people at any one time?
Personally, I believe that we have this sort of psychosis that we should all use less energy or be more energy efficient. I think that's a terrible, terrible idea. I think it's great to invent new forms of energy generation that are better for the planet, but the idea that we should all use less energy is just flying in the face of history, and we used to think that we would use more and more energy. That where's my flying car? You know, we'd all have our own personal nuclear reactors. I mean, all of this sort of stuff broke in the 1970s. I don't think we get massive advances in transportation technology until we accept that everyone should be using a hell of a lot more energy.
And maybe that's also about, in order to get the appetite for it, it's about the selling of it, or like, it was what I was saying earlier about that you've got to sell this stuff to people. And I don't know whether it was the top of this show or the end of the last show, Maggie, that you were talking about what we got in our day-to-day lives that have come from our going to space. And perhaps if people knew that a bit more, there would be more of that appetite. So I don't know, will we get anything from this that we will be able to use in our homes in the next few years, or in our phones or anything, do you think?
Potentially, yes. What exactly right now, I can't tell you. Maybe high-tech toilets.
And this is something that perhaps not this space flight or indeed Artemis 3 or 4 will get us, but the moon-based. I mean, that's going to require a lot of new technology that we just can't really imagine.
So actually, I just thought of one, actually. So the optical comms that they've been testing, that is new technology. So the optical comms is laser communication. When we're used to communicating with radio waves, they're using lasers. And they're getting like 100 times speeds.
So in a few years we could be using phones with laser communication to each other then, because it would maybe be more efficient.
This would be using more satellites, which is not necessarily a good thing. But we could have lasers beaming directly to our phones, having even faster than the 5G that we have right now.
If Artemis and its sort of consequence or the programs that follow it mean the abolition of the loading bar, I will be a very, very happy person. If we can finally stop the spinning wheel of doom or the buffering of a video, I mean, thank goodness that will be an advancement indeed. Let's speak now to the director of the American Space Museum, Mark Marquette. Mark, thanks indeed for joining us live on this historic day. Mark, you're going to have to make some more space in your museum.
Well, thank you so much. Quite a privilege. We got a lot of people on the Space Coast that are just thrilled, like thousands of space workers that have put their lives into this mission. And for everything to work so beautifully is really a testament to the whole process.
Now, of course, you've charted the history of the space race, and for many of us, for perhaps people like me, I was born in the 1990s. When I look back at the space race, it's something that sort of seems to be in the rear-view mirror for me. It's something that happened before I was born, in large part. I mean, the incredible advancements of mankind almost seemed old-fashioned. Is that a sense you've got when children come to your museum, when you teach of the amazing strides that have been made by NASA and indeed the wider world?
Well, our museum is all about the birth of America's space age. We have artifacts that space workers use, manuals, consoles, and they get to sit at them and switch the switches and so forth. And today it's all done on smart tablets and computers. But, you know, what an accomplishment of 50 years later to return to the moon. And when we did it 50 years ago, it was with slide rules was our computer. And but yet the passion and this new generation embracing it is what really excites me. I'm in a hotel. I couldn't get back to my office because I had dinner with astronaut Charlie Walker, who did 3 shuttle launches in 1984 and 85, and we watched the splashdown together with some friends. And both being baby boomers, we were just happy that the next generation can possibly do what ours didn't have the money or incentive to do, and that is stay on the moon like an Antarctica base and do all the real science and all the things that can benefit society. And as I hear you all talking about some of the spin-offs of the space program, certainly this communication with you, I'm actually is one of them. Everyone has a computer and a camera in their hands now. And I'm actually standing about 4,200 miles away from London, which is the distance that Artemis came to the moon closest, but still having human eyes on the backside of the moon for the first time at that distance is a real Earthrise moment, so to speak, in your life.
That's an important point, actually, that perhaps has been missed in some of this coverage. When the Apollo astronauts orbited the moon, they did it much closer than what Artemis did now. So a lot of those pictures that we have of the moon from the Apollo astronauts, very, very close up, the moon looms huge in their windows. Whereas seeing that bit further away, you get these remote, sort of never seen before photographs of just how the moon sort of, you can see the curvature of it much more, and the Earth behind it.
Yeah, great. It's like you can't see the forest for the trees. Until you get away from the trees, you see the immensity of the whole forest. So that is a unique perspective, and a lot talked about was this concentric circle that looks like a bullseye or an eyeball called Mare Orientale. If you could imagine, that is on the left side of the moon when you look at the full moon. And if mankind had been staring at that Mare Orientale bullseye of a crater impact for thousands of years, we'd have a whole culture around that, just like we do about the moon today.
Mark, I'm just going to pause you for a second to listen into NASA's coverage. I'm just going to see whether those astronauts have made it out yet.
And then they'll be back here
Great.
on the ship.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Now, we're trying to ascertain whether or not the astronauts have...
Saw a thumbs up from one of the personnel on the front porch.
So those astronauts not yet out of the capsule. It looks like they're now getting ready to deploy what they call the Air Rescue Vest, ARV. And so this is the harness that each crew member will get into in order to be hoisted into the helicopters. Again, those helicopters hovering just about 40 feet above the front porch when they're ready to pick up each crew member. Now, of course, these crew members have a lot more space to prepare for being hoisted than the Apollo crew did, when they had to sort of cling to the side of the spacecraft, of the capsule, of Integrity or Orion, whatever we want to call it. They now have this sort of apron, this inflatable apron to stand out on. We'll keep dipping back into the NASA coverage as we ascertain more of what is going on there. Mark Marquette still with us, the director of the American Space Museum. Mark, you were speaking about the technology that the Apollo-era spacecraft had, and the computing power of perhaps all of Apollo 11 is less than the sort of computing power that we all carry around on our mobile telephones today.
Oh, much less. 64 kilobytes. Nobody even knows what a kilobyte is. That's what the main computer was. And yet, you know, we did it with that technology of slide rules and reams of paper. The joke in the museum is there's so much paperwork that we should have just stacked it up and we could have walked to the moon. But
I mean, it is remarkable to think about that. Sort of punch card computing.
Yeah. From Fortran punch computers, things to today's the screens that they had, the total automation. There's not, you know, all these switches and stuff to use. It's truly amazing. For me personally, and the astronaut Charlie Walker that we were having dinner, our moment came when the parachutes come out. You know, the reentry. I was pretty confident that the heat shield was going to be no problem, but you got to have them parachutes work. And like was talked about earlier, that's technology from centuries ago, basically, that we're using, that still works and is still effective. Sometimes the old tried and true method is what we've done. We've done it to land our rovers on Mars with parachutes in an atmosphere, and parachute technology has grown leaps and leaps and bounds. But it's quite amazing to watch those 3 parachutes reef out, and then you know they're going to be safe.
And you mentioned some of the Mars landings. I believe NASA has landed at least 2 rovers on Mars, and yet that doesn't seem to have sort of ignited public excitement in the same way that human space travel does.
Of course not, but robots are how we're exploring Mars, and that's how we explored the moon first. We had the Ranger unmanned spacecraft that had 6 cameras that crash landed kamikaze style into the moon. Then we had the Surveyor, little spidery spacecraft that landed that Apollo 12 went right up to. And then we had the Lunar Orbiter that did reconnaissance at 4 of those that mapped out the moon. That's how we knew that big Mare Oriental was on the left side of the moon. Mankind must send robots ahead of time, okay? You can't really equate that to the great sailing ships of England and Spain and so forth. But then again, their robots were sometimes a bird that would fly off the ship and bring a sprig of a tree branch or something back to show them that land was nearby. But robot technology is very important, and that's how we must explore to guarantee that humans can do it safely.
I love that analogy of the English and the Spanish going out there and finding the new world, of founding new civilizations. I mean, I've often thought, is this why? I mean, other than the great wealth and the sort of superpower status of the United States, is there something in the American spirit that Americans were those Englishmen who ventured out into the unknown across a dangerous journey, thousands of miles, to find something new? I mean, is that just born into the American identity that you need to go out, go beyond, go further?
It certainly is. It's a great connection between our 250th anniversary of America and the founding fathers being Europeans and of ilk, to see that the North American natives here, they didn't explore to go to Europe. They didn't have an interest in that. So, I think this is more of a European type of development in mankind's psyche. Trade was a huge part of it. And there might be a huge trade business created when we find valuable minerals on the moon, for example. So the exploration, but for the sake of exploration, always increases mankind's knowledge, but also fulfills, I think, our innate DNA to explore the universe.
Okay,
and these are some of the first baby steps.
Very much indeed, Director of the American Space Museum. I can at this time confirm the first crew member is out of the Orion Integrity capsule. The first crew member is out. We are yet to know the identity of that crew member, but we have had it confirmed that the first astronaut is back out and onto that raft after almost 10 days inside that capsule.
I think there might actually be 2 now.
We now have 2 crew members.
One sat down on the what's that called again? The raft, and then the other one just coming out now. So I think we've just got the second out.
And for people watching, they're the people in orange.
Yes,
are the astronauts there. So that's one in the far part of the porch, one in the mid part of the porch. We might well be able to see number 3 any time now. Let's keep a close eye on this. This is, of course, a key moment. I mean, Maggie, these people will have been... It's not a bad size. It's about the size of a camper van, perhaps. But they'll have been stuck there for the best part of 10 days.
Yeah, it's a cramped space, but much roomier than the Apollo days. So, like you said, about a camper van size, and they were able to move around. They were able to exercise on board. They had their private toilet.
And that's a crucial difference compared to the Apollo days.
Yeah, absolutely. They were kind of stuck in place. A tiny, tiny space. You cannot imagine how bad that would have smelt, I guess, after 10 days.
Number 3 has just walked out, it looks like. We've got the 2 of them. There's only 2 sat down there and a third one just walking out.
I wonder if they got the first 3 Americans out before they got the Canadian out. Or perhaps it's the Canadian first. Who knows? Who knows?
They're going to leave the Canadian in there.
As long as it's ladies first.
Ladies first.
You would hope so. That's the rule of the sea, and I'm sure the rule of space as well. Commander Reese Wiseman is last out, the captain of the ship. Got to be the last one out.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Very, very fitting indeed. So let's just wait to see.
There's a helicopter flying.
See Reese Wiseman, and so we can see the three of the others sat down there on the porch, that inflatable floating apron there, bobbing along gently.
Just him there. I think he's just...
Oh, we can see his head, yes. Gosh, it's like a berth.
I'm glad they're wearing orange, because it makes it very easy.
Yes. It makes it much easier to see, doesn't it?
Well, that's one of the reasons that they tend to wear orange, is that if they go into the sea, then they're easy to spot, and probably why those kind of balls on the top are orange as well, and the raft is orange as well, just to make it very easy to find them.
That's highly, highly important. I suppose that goes the same as sort of life jackets and everything else that we're used to. I mean, they are called spaceships for a reason.
Yeah. But again, these are all just like, I know I made the point before, but it's just so basic. These are just basic rules that are all just being followed.
I'm told now all four are out. We can hear applause from NASA there. All four astronauts now out there onto the porch. Let's just listen in to some of this applause from NASA headquarters.
Once again, all four crew members now on the front porch, and the procedure to begin hoisting them up to these two Navy helicopters hovering overhead will begin shortly.
There we have it, confirmation from NASA. Jane, you're smiling, nodding, almost whooping alongside them.
I think we've forgotten already how nervous we were when there were really some dangerous moments, and to think there are four families and four sets of loved ones of those astronauts who will be incredibly relieved that, you know, this is the moment we know they are all okay. They're all fine, and that's the moment we are so pleased to see NASA celebrate. Just the number of people. I don't know if we know how many people can say they contributed to getting this mission safely achieved. It would be hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I'm being mouthed thousands very helpfully.
Thousands of people are involved in a project like this around the world as well. The Artemis is the Artemis Accords with other countries taking on. Britain plays a big role in this as well. I mean, through the European Space Agency, there's a big role. In fact, not just through the European Space Agency, some companies in Britain have supplied material directly to the contractors building these vehicles.
Did the European Space Agency make the
service module,
the service bit?
So that's the other half of Orion, the bit with all the solar panels and those cameras. Let's turn to Greg Swenson in DC. The Artemis Accords, Greg, are a big piece of diplomacy that seem to be in a time when international cooperation is, let's say, fractured. In space, it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. I think, you know, these people have been at this for a long time, and so they're above the fray, and it's probably a good thing. And so I was actually surprised to see, you know, a Canadian on the, and it's the first time, by the way, we've had a Canadian join the mission. So, yeah, I don't imagine they care much about politics. I mean, occasionally you do see an astronaut come out. I mentioned John Glenn. You've got Mark Kelly, who's a senator from Arizona. But typically these people are, you know, scientists, they're adventurers, they're fantastic and brave pilots for the most part. So look, I think, you know, this is something that a little international cooperation probably doesn't change with the ebbs and flows of politics.
And that is really important as well, because for the longest time, the sort of outer space has been governed by basically a version of the Antarctic Treaty, that no one can own anything, that nothing can be exploited, and the Artemis Accords begin to unpick that. If you want to be involved in the Artemis program, as the European Space Agency is, as Japan is, as Canada is, as many, many spacefaring countries are, then you need to sign up to the Artemis Accords that begin to sort of govern the rules of what ownership of space might look like, what resource extraction in space might look like, how space becomes a commercial space rather than just one that states explore.
Yeah, look, I think, the U.S. in many respects has learned the hard way about dependency on our adversaries for critical minerals and other, critical inputs to our economy. And so, I think this is another space race. It happened in the late 50s and in the 60s. We won it then, and I'm quite sure we're going to win it again, especially if we have cooperation from our allies. So this is a really great moment for the bonds of Western civilization. It really is.
And that is such an important element of the Artemis program that because Canada supplied, I think it was going to be an arm for what was then the Lunar Gateway project, but is now the sort of moon-based project as it's been transformed under the new administrator. Any country that is supplying something to this mission will get one of the 4 seats in future missions. It was a Canadian this time. Perhaps one day it will be a Brit, but it's likely to be someone from Japan on a moon landing mission, given that they're supplying sort of a hermetically sealed rover.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are great scientists everywhere and around the world, and I think your earlier guest, Mathia, he's a Russian. I imagine he was in the U.S. when he was speaking on the program. I mean, we have some great, if you're a really smart scientist and you're living in China or you're living in the Soviet Union going back a generation, why would you stay there when there's so much more opportunity? So I think in America. So I think this will continue to be America-led. We will win the space race, but it won't just be with American talent. It'll have to be, again, led by America, but not without cooperation from our great allies. So this is, again, a good moment for the Western alliance.
While you say that, there is, of course, fierce competition now from China. They've been testing their lunar capabilities. They're constructing a lander. They hope to land on the moon by 2029. If the NASA schedule slips by even a few months, I mean, it could be the case that China beats America back to the moon.
Sure. I mean, look, there's always that risk, and it happened to us with the Soviet Union, as I mentioned. But I'm quite confident America will win that race. And again, if you're a talented Chinese scientist, you have every incentive to move to America. I wouldn't say that about great American scientists. I haven't seen a lot of immigrants out of America into communist China. So I'm always going to lead with America, and I think we win that space race hands down.
Yeah, it's never been a good historic move to bet against America, but we'll have to wait and see. I think perhaps one of the reasons why it's been more than 50 years since man landed on the moon is that people have been complacent about America's leadership in space.
Yeah, and look, I think this is another testament to the greatest generation. The people from the men and women who came back from World War II and led America for that generation, the greatest generation. My father would be 106 if he was alive today, and those are the people that really drove the space program, drove the space race, and really made America great after the war. And I think there's an opportunity for the next great generation or next greatest generation to do the same. And with the technology that's been driven, and you look at the private sector accomplishments in space, in technology, it's really incredible what's going on. So I think this is a great opportunity. As Mark said, Mark Marquette said a few minutes ago, it's a shame that the younger baby boomers especially didn't get to experience that in the way that my older siblings did, for example. But there's a great opportunity here, and I'm glad that it's being powered forward right now, and it's an exciting moment.
Absolutely, a new space age. Let's hope this is the beginning. Greg Swenson, thanks indeed for joining us there live from Washington, D.C. I'm going to return to my panel here in London now. Andy Lound, we have seen the detachment of this sort of apron from the capsule.
Yeah. Yeah, we're waiting now for the helicopters to come and pick up the people now. So that's the next stage what they're going to look at. They're obviously well, healthy, happy. Doesn't seem to be anything weird going on out there at the moment. It's a very slow process from the old Apollo days, which we remember. But things have changed now. Things are doing really well. And it's a different era, it's a different technology, and it's a different style. But it's still just as exciting. I think it actually helps emphasise how dangerous and serious this kind of project is. It's not simple. It's not like the movies. This is real, and it is a dangerous game. And I get back to what a colleague in the United States was pointing out about the Artemis Accords. It's quite important countries do work together to go into space, because there are two blocks being formed now. And the treaty you're referring to is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty.
Yes.
Which is out of date. It's been out of date for many years, because the only way...
It was a sort of utopian vision of no one's going to own everything or anything. It's all it's sort of based on the Antarctic Treaty.
The exploration we do into space, go to the moon and it'll go to the other planets, is an extension of ourselves. And the best thing to effect is good is when the old world went to the new world. And what did we do? We expanded further west, and then it was open then to miners and landowners staking claims and expanding it that way. That's exactly what we're going to do in space. We're going to expand like that.
Can I ask, because there will be people who are absolute space lovers who will be saying, well, hang on, should it be profit motivated? Should the planets that we eventually get to, should it be the motivation of ransacking them, of taking the minerals, of it being a capitalist endeavour? Should that be the reasons why we did it? Won't that ruin space?
I know. I mean, that's what you get when you... I get a lot of space enthusiasts saying this, and I have to say to them, I'm sorry, you've got to come back into the real world now. We're the real humans, and this is how we survive. We are a species that needs to survive. We survive by using resources. People might not like that. That's the way we survive. We can't do it without it. And therefore, this is the next step in our survival programme. Minerals, resources in space, and expanding our species into the universe.
Because it is ruthless. We wouldn't have cancer drugs. We wouldn't have, amazing advances that we've had in our lives without capitalism.
But also, some people love to stare at the twinkling stars and the sort of romance of the barren moon and think, leave it untouched. But you look at it and it's dead. It doesn't even have active volcanoes on it anymore, as Maggie was telling us. I mean, it is remarkable, actually, that private enterprise and endeavour could breathe life into a solar system that doesn't have any life apart from on our planet here.
You post a lot about the housing crisis, Tom. I mean, I could just see a development on there and you'd be absolutely thrilled.
I think there is a little bit more room on this planet as well.
Let's not get into that one.
But remarkably, there are companies now like Blue Origin, owned by Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder billionaire, that has just tested, just this week, a machine that can turn moon dust into oxygen.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking about stuff that's on the level of alchemy now. I mean, the idea that you can turn rock to breathable air, I mean, this stuff's going to be really necessary for when we're on the moon. The mind boggles about what could actually be done and achieved.
It's also the spin-off technologies you get from doing that we can actually utilise down here. Something I always like to get a mentioning, because I'm biased towards it, is on the Apollo programme. The Apollo programme only worked because Britain had developed the hydrogen fuel cell. Francis Bacon developed that on his own bat with his own money, and that was given to Pratt & Whitney to develop. They spent $120 million developing it, handed it back to Britain because it was under licence. We shelved it. People talk about energy issues. I'm sorry, we had that and we developed it and we let it slip. It's interesting to see that when you talk about the energy things in the 70s. We had that and that was a let go. And that's a real sad thing there. There was something we'd actually got to grips with and let it slide.
At this moment, we can see the recovery helicopter hovering above those astronauts. We can just see the power of those rotary blades beating down on the Pacific Ocean. And we can see the recovery net being lowered down there to retrieve those astronauts who are sitting really rather happy there in that flotation device. And this is a somewhat familiar scene now with the same technology used in Apollo, that rather impressive vision. You can see just the power of that helicopter, which must be, Maggie, I imagine, a little bit unpleasant to be directly underneath.
I don't know what's more scary, that actual re-entry or this part when they're being lifted off by helicopters.
Why don't they
one of them's afraid of heights, isn't he?
Yes.
But why don't they just take them off? If there are all those boats around them, why don't they just take them off by boat rather than actually
maybe
having
a
to winch
longer
them with
winch, so that's less choppy.
Well, I can imagine that it would be quite fun to be on the back of a speedboat bouncing across the ocean on your way back to the larger... But Jane, this is just a sort of quite mesmerising image, really, and it speaks to the strange sort of beauty of this.
It is, and I think I don't know if it's just I've got carried away in the moment, but it does feel like a new era is starting. And when you were speaking, I was thinking, our armed forces are also looking into space. We have our UK Space Command now at RAF High Wycombe. It's a tri-service that future defence will also be happening in space, all of the space junk. That politics will come into this, and ownership of space, it will be fascinating. And because of technology advancing so quickly, I think this China-USA competition will be a big factor in the next decade for space exploration. And I do think, certainly while Donald Trump's in the White House, he will want to do everything to be successful in that race.
What's really interesting is that this is coming at a time where NASA's budget is the lowest kind of fraction of the US GDP compared to Apollo era where money was just thrown at it. And we're getting more and more cuts all the time.
Yeah, there's an important element there because people often complain that we could spend this money on other things. But where the American military budget goes up, space budget goes down, and that's where the space grabs its money from, usually from the military budget. So it's no good saying that, if we didn't do a space programme, we could fund housing. Well, we didn't have we didn't have a moon programme from the late 70s to the 90s. I noticed World Food Programme hasn't been solved.
One of my favourite statistics, and sorry to bring the mood down, is that the UK benefits budget this year rose by £18 billion. £18 billion in dollars is about $24 billion. That's the entire annual budget of NASA. Just the amount that we rose benefit spending this year alone. That is the annual budget of NASA. It's 0.5% of the American federal budget. It's actually, in the grand scale of things, I mean, yes, an enormous amount of money.
But maybe this takes
compared
us
to the rest of spending, not really.
All back round to why there needs to be a commercial element to this, because it's not sustainable for governments to be able to just throw billions at it if we want to make the advancements. And competition, even if it is between China and America, competition is always quite a good thing, isn't it? Because, of course, it makes innovation and it makes things happen.
But even if governments throw the money into it, it all goes back to the economy. All of these jobs are getting created to send these people to the moon.
Well, that is a very positive note to look over there on the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of San Diego, where it is still just sort of the early afternoon, and we're seeing the safe return of those astronauts. We're seeing the helicopter pick them up one by one to return them to the US Navy, and indeed safe to dry land. It has been the most remarkable success. It has been an absolute joy. Thank you indeed for spending this historic night with The Late Show Live. Thank you to my panel of Greg, Andy, Maggie, Christo and Jane. And let's just leave you with this.
Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy, on this historic mission, you take with you the heart of this Artemis team, the daring spirit of the American people and our partners across the globe, and the hopes and dreams of a new generation. Good luck. Godspeed, Artemis 2.
4, 3, 2,
Let's go.
1. Booster ignition. And liftoff. The crew of Artemis 2 now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins. It was an amazing ride uphill. The views, we've got 2 moon rises that we've had so far, and the views of planet Earth. We've circled it completely, and we forgot how beautiful it is to look down on Earth. Humanity has won
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. An unsettled weekend to come filled with April showers. It'll be quite breezy out there this morning, but there will also be some brighter spells, particularly through this afternoon. That's once this main band of rain clears away to the east of the UK. You can see behind it clearer skies developing, so some brighter weather around, but it will remain quite breezy and on the fresher side. And then showers push into western areas, most frequently across more northwestern areas of England, but Wales, the far southwest, also seeing a risk of showers through the day. In any brighter spells in the southeast, highs of around 14 degrees. Further west, exposed to that southwesterly wind, it will feel much fresher than this. So into Saturday evening, those showers become more frequent across more western areas. I think you'll be lucky to escape them at all through the evening, particularly across parts of Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland, seeing a real swathe of showers pushing in. Some of these quite heavy. They bring a risk of hail as well as some hill snow. We will see some flurries of snow over the high ground of Scotland as well as some areas of northern England into this weekend, because temperatures are a little bit below average and below where I think many of us want them to be. Low pressure stays with us into Sunday as well, so further showers will push in from the south and west. Many eastern areas remaining relatively dry through Saturday night, but most of us seeing a spell of rain overnight. Because there will be some quite brisk winds, lots of cloud around as well. Another fairly mild night, but temperatures coming close to zero where it does remain a little bit calmer. So another unsettled day to come on Sunday, a swathe of showers across parts of Scotland as well as Northern Ireland, where we're close to this area of low pressure. Another windy spell as well, gusts of 50 miles per hour here are likely. And then showers continue across the south coast with a southwesterly wind, but there will be some brighter weather and temperatures will climb to around 14 or 15 degrees there. Bye-bye.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you to our global community for watching and listening to GB News. We're not only the #1 news channel in Britain, we're chosen by you around the world.
Five hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me. Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
Needs to stop.